The pangolin glared at me with its blood-red eyes. In that moment, time seemed to freeze. Everyone around held their breath, unable to believe their eyes as I faced the giant mutated beast head-on. Many of them stood there with their mouths hanging wide open. Even Jiang Cheng was stunned, his hands trembling so much he almost dropped his gun. He never thought I could be this strong, but seeing me fight with his own eyes left him in absolute awe. Is this really still human strength? It felt as if the entire power of a giant mutated beast was compressed into a human body, far exceeding anything he had ever imagined. I looked down at my hands. The blue light had faded, but my fists were still aching and even bleeding. Yet, an indescribable sense of exhilaration surged within me. Fighting with my own enhanced body brought a thrill that guns and ammo could never provide. The moment my punch landed, my whole body felt filled with blue energy, my blood boiling in every vein. I didn't give the giant pangolin any chance to counterattack. I stomped hard on the ground, launching myself into the air, and threw a full-force punch straight at its head. The wind howled like a fierce storm. The pangolin was now buried deep in the concrete wall, completely immobilized. My punch struck down like a thunderbolt, aiming right for its forehead. But right then, an ear-piercing screech rang out, making everyone's head throb. A transparent shield suddenly appeared in front of the giant pangolin's head, and my punch slammed right into it. The shield trembled violently, looking like it was about to shatter, while the blue energy on my fist gradually dimmed. A series of cracking sounds echoed as the scales on the pangolin's body began to split open, blood spraying out wildly. Forcing out that shield to block my attack had clearly caused it excruciating pain. Even so, I couldn't help but be amazed. What the hell is this? I had only ever seen mutated beasts rely on strength, speed, or claws to attack. This was the first time I'd seen one use an energy shield to defend itself. Finally, the shield couldn't hold on and shattered, sending a shockwave rippling outward. The giant pangolin used this moment to break free from the concrete wall and started digging into the ground. Its front claws tore through the earth and rocks like tofu. In the blink of an eye, it burrowed deep underground, using its hind legs to kick dirt back and seal the tunnel behind it. It was trying to escape by digging. Right then, the base vehicle roared to life. A spiraling black beam shot out from the front cannon, the air cannon powered by black hole energy. In an instant, the air seemed to tear apart as the black beam blasted straight into the ground. A series of deafening explosions echoed, blowing the ground wide open as if a massive earthquake had just hit. The pangolin, having just burrowed underground, was struck by the blast and sent flying into the air. At the same time, I dashed right in front of it and threw a powerful uppercut at its jaw. The pangolin's lower jaw was smashed open, and the blue energy pierced straight through, obliterating its brain and turning it into mush. Its massive body crashed heavily onto the ground, twitched a few times, and then lay completely still. I stood next to the pangolin's corpse and took a deep breath. This was the first time I had gone all out since my evolution, and also the first time I had coordinated so perfectly with the base vehicle piloted by Yang. Right after, Rin Shiyu's voice echoed in my mind, telling me that the mental link had been severed. And if she wasn't mistaken, the one controlling the pangolin must be very far away. I asked her why. She explained that she had been keeping a close watch on the surroundings and even traced that mental thread, but still couldn't find its source. If she spread her mental power in a radius, the range wasn't large, but if she focused it in one direction, she could scan very far. The fact that she couldn't find the source only proved one thing. The culprit was much stronger than her. Their mental power alone was vastly superior, not to mention they could control a pangolin like this. Hearing this, my expression turned serious. I had just set foot on the island nation, and I was already facing such a terrifying enemy. Jiang Cheng approached, looking at the pangolin's corpse with eyes full of admiration. He kept praising my strength and the base vehicle's firepower, amazed that a single shot could flip the entire ground. He had seen plenty of giant monsters in the island nation, but none with the terrifying power of this one. Yet, I had managed to take it down single-handedly. I just shook my head. The limit of one's strength is the limit of their vision. He couldn't understand that this monster was actually nothing compared to the mastermind behind it. I told Jiang Cheng to go on ahead, saying I had some things to take care of, then turned to the frail girl I had bought. It was obvious that the pangolin's target wasn't me, but her. I coldly asked if she was going to explain herself, because if it weren't for her, we wouldn't have been attacked. Rin Xiu stood beside me, acting as a translator while using her mental field to shield our conversation. The girl looked at the pangolin's corpse, then at me. She stayed silent for a long time before slowly uttering 2 words, Shingui. She explained that he was a puppet master who used the corpses of mutated beasts or powerful awakened ones. He combined them with special metals to create puppets and controlled them from afar. The one who attacked her was Shun Gui, one of the 10 council members of the Guang organization. Hearing the name, Guang, my eyes flickered. Getting involved with this organization didn't surprise me, as I had already guessed that at least one of their bases was located in the island nation. Moreover, the girl's mental reaction when she saw the word Guang earlier had already said it all. I asked about the number of council members. She explained that there were actually 11, but one of them was the council president, so when people said 10 council members, they excluded him. Hearing that, I understood that the council president must be vastly stronger than the other members. This organization was truly terrifying. I continued to ask about her identity and why Xingui wanted to kill her. She fell silent again, and I waited patiently, because today I absolutely had to know the truth. The pangolin's appearance had dragged me into an unnecessary attack. I needed to know exactly what I was up against. Finally, she said that she was a test subject for the armament. Hearing that, I immediately realized my previous speculations were correct. She really was connected to the armament. I asked her to clarify what the armament was. If Guang valued it so much, it definitely wasn't something ordinary. She said the armament had a very complex origin, first discovered over half a century ago during an expedition to an ancient civilization. Its form was just a dark green crystal, about the size of a finger, shaped like a regular octahedron. At first, Guang thought it was just a special diamond, but later discovered its hardness far exceeded diamonds, and it contained futuristic technology beyond imagination. It wasn't until the apocalypse broke out that they realized the armament crystal was actually the control unit of a type of weapon. It was a suit of armor that could cover the entire body, even carrying its own life field. When summoned, the armor would form a comprehensive protective layer, allowing the user to fly in the sky, dive underground, and become practically invincible. Hearing this, I couldn't help but be stunned. If this thing really had that kind of power, then in the apocalyptic world, it truly was invincible. Even I couldn't help but feel tempted. I asked why I had heard earlier that the armament in the island nation hadn't been found yet, while she claimed Guang had discovered it a long time ago. She shook her head, saying the one I was talking about was a different armament. Over half a century ago, when Guang found the armament, it was located in the center of an ancient ruin. There were 4 indentations on the stone pedestal, meaning there could be 4 versions of the armament. But when they arrived, they only found one version. The other 3 had disappeared long ago. 3 of them were regular octahedrons, while the one in the very center was spherical. It seemed to be the most precious one, and also the one Guang desired the most. When the apocalypse hit, Guang gathered a massive amount of data related to that ancient ruin, deducing its true origin. The ruin belonged to a mysterious civilization, but for unknown reasons, this civilization had completely perished. The armament was the last thing they left behind, the crystallization of all their most advanced technology. The armament could fuse with the consciousness of an intelligent being to activate. Once the fusion was complete, the user only needed to use their mind to summon the armament's true form. The 3 octahedral armaments were battle armors meant for the warriors of that civilization, and the spherical version in the center was their ultimate space battleship. Hearing this, I was suddenly startled. A spherical armament? The ultimate battleship of a mysterious civilization? The star seed suddenly flashed in my mind. The star seed was also spherical, and after fusing with my consciousness, it had always resided in my brain, never leaving. The starseed's function was to build the base vehicle, but the current base vehicle was clearly just in its initial form. After evolving, the starseed could now operate on water, so the next stage could very well be taking to the skies, becoming an all-terrain base capable of land, water, and air travel. And what about after that? If it eventually turned into a space battleship, that wouldn't be impossible either. Could it be that the Star Seed was the most important armament? Its purpose of existence was to reconstruct an ultimate battleship. Or in other words, the Star Seed was originally the control system of that battleship, but because that civilization had collapsed, the battleship was destroyed, so now it needed massive amounts of energy and materials to rebuild itself from scratch. And I was the captain chosen by the Star Seed. This realization completely woke me up. All the previous clues finally connected. Those octahedral armaments were probably combat armors for the captain and warriors on the battleship. And the black holes were very likely the core energy source of the Star Seed. That explained why black holes suddenly appeared after the apocalypse, and why the Star Seed sent out signals urging me to conquer them. It wasn't a coincidence that black holes helped the Star Seed evolve, but because the black holes themselves were originally a part of it. Black holes could devour everything and convert it into energy. Thanks to that self-regenerating energy source, that civilization was able to cross the vast universe and reach Earth. The more I thought about it, the more resolute I became in keeping the Star Seed an absolute secret. If Guang found out that the ultimate armament they had been desperately searching for was in my hands, they would absolutely never let me go. Fortunately, even if they saw the base vehicle right now, they could never associate it with a space battleship. After all, who would have thought that an ultimate battleship would start out as a battered old bus? Thinking of that, I even felt a bit of irony. It was exactly like those stories where a sword god or martial emperor reincarnates into a poor, starving minor sect. I gathered my thoughts and said, "Thank you for giving me so much information, but I still have a few questions. You said you were a test subject for the armament. What exactly does that mean, and what is your true relationship with Guang?" Hearing my question, the girl fell silent again. Her eyes dimmed, seemingly reliving painful memories. Seeing this, I told her that if it was too painful, she didn't have to answer. But she shook her head, saying there was nothing left to hide. It was all in the past. She said that after the armament was discovered, for a very long time, Guang didn't fully understand its true nature. It wasn't until right before the apocalypse broke out that they gathered enough information and realized that for the armament to work, it first had to be implanted into the human brain. But the armament was originally designed for a different life form. It was very difficult for humans to adapt to it. If an ordinary person had the armament implanted into their brain, the outcome was almost certainly instant death. Hearing this, I froze. Right now, a super armament far surpassing those things was residing in my head. Yet I was perfectly fine. I didn't even feel anything unusual when I fused with the Star Seed. Thinking about the possibility that I could have died on the spot if I hadn't been compatible sent a chill down my spine. I asked again, if you say it usually results in death, does that mean there are cases of survival? She nodded, saying that theoretically, yes. There might even be someone perfectly compatible with the armament, but the probability was astronomically low. Guang had searched for many test subjects, but couldn't find anyone truly compatible. I asked her why she was still alive. She replied that she had undergone the experiment, but she wasn't naturally compatible. She was forcibly altered. Before her, many test subjects had died. However, Guang still managed to collect data, monitoring brainwaves to find the type of mental frequency that could harmonize with the armament. They couldn't change the armament, but they could forcibly alter human mental waves. After synthesizing the final data, they selected 7 test subjects and altered their minds to be completely compatible. Out of those 7, she was the only survivor. She said she had merged with the armament, but because of the forced alteration, it wasn't perfect. The overwhelming energy had mutated her body, constitution, and bloodline. She didn't originally look this frail and pale. Hearing this, I finally understood that her change in appearance wasn't a disguise, but the consequence of a failed fusion. She said that for her, just being alive was a blessing. After checking their vitals, Guang forcibly extracted the armament from the 7 of them. At that time, she fell into a state of suspended animation. Even Guang didn't realize she was still alive, which was how she found a chance to escape. It was only when they noticed her body was missing that they started hunting her down, because Guang absolutely would not allow a living test subject to exist. Hearing all this, an indescribable feeling welled up inside me. If there theoretically existed someone perfectly compatible with the armament, then it was highly likely that person was me. I didn't just accidentally pick up the star seed. The star seed actively chose me. It was an artificial intelligence, the control system of a battleship, possessing its own will and the ability to choose its master. As for the girl in front of me, she had once merged with the armament, so it wasn't strange that she caused a special fluctuation in the star seed's energy. I continued to ask why Guang chose the 7 of them as the final test subjects. Was it because they were all very strong? She admitted that they were all top-tier level 2 awakened. I was shocked, asking if Guang was really willing to sacrifice 7 level 2 awakened just for an experiment. Were they all captured? She shook her head, saying they were originally members of Guang. Hearing this, I was completely dumbfounded. She smiled bitterly, saying they were the faction that got purged. After the apocalypse, a power struggle erupted among Guang's higher-ups, and the former president was assassinated. The new leader took over, and the organization's ideology changed. Everyone belonging to the former president's faction had to die, and the former president was her father. In that moment, I was truly left speechless. The girl in front of me was once the daughter of Guang's leader. Falling from a princess to a test subject, that kind of disparity was enough to drive anyone to despair. I understood why her mental state fluctuated so violently whenever Guang was mentioned. The apocalypse had crushed countless destinies, and in a world where strength was everything, only the ruthless and unscrupulous could survive. I remembered what the man in black had said, that Guang's members all crave the evolution of life, even immortality. That temptation was enough to make people sell their souls. I looked at the girl and asked the final question on my mind. You already escaped, so why did you join the Jiansha Society and become a slave in the black market? In my mind, finding a safe place to hide would have made much more sense. The girl spoke slowly, because the Jiansha Society holds a secret that very few people know about. A secret? Hearing her words, I paused for a moment. I had always thought the Jiansha Society was just an ordinary underworld syndicate. I never expected it to be closely tied to Guang. I want to take back something that originally belonged to my father, the girl said through gritted teeth, her voice dripping with hatred. The leader of the Jiansha Society, Shueisha, is the right-hand man of Guang's current president. In Shueisha's collection, there is a black metal cube. That item was also discovered in the ancient civilization's ruins and originally belonged to my father. My father called it the Black Magic Cube. After my father was killed, the Black Magic Cube fell into Shueisha's hands, but he probably still doesn't know what it's actually used for. The Black Magic Cube? I asked, frowning. The girl hesitated for a moment before answering. It's a storage vessel. Only my father and I know its true function and how to use it. On the outside, it's only the size of a music box, but inside, it seals a massive space. Hearing this, my heart skipped a beat. Isn't this exactly like the storage space in my base vehicle? After multiple upgrades, the base vehicle storage space had reached 100 cubic meters, enough to store ammunition, food, and mutated beast meat. Moreover, things placed inside wouldn't spoil over time. I used to think I was the only one who possessed this kind of space. I didn't expect her father to have one too. But thinking about it carefully, it wasn't hard to understand. The star seed was originally a part of that civilization's ruins, so the appearance of a similar storage space was perfectly normal. In the apocalypse, a portable storage space held immeasurable value. Once exposed, it would definitely lead to a bloody struggle. From this girl, I had gained a lot of crucial information about the light. I glanced at her and said slowly, "You've told me so much, even revealing your father's treasure. Are you trying to tempt me into helping you deal with the Jiansha commune to take back the Black Tesseract?" The girl took a deep breath and nodded frankly. "Yes. Why did you reveal the true function of the Black Tesseract? Aren't you afraid that once I know its value, I won't give it back to you?" I asked. Honestly, I didn't care too much about that storage space. With the current base vehicle, 100 cubic meters was already enough. I was just reacting the way any normal person would upon hearing about a treasure. The girl looked at me and said, "If I didn't tell you, you wouldn't be tempted. Besides, I couldn't trick you into secretly taking back the Black Tesseract anyway. Honestly, I don't expect you to return it. The Black Tesseract is yours, and everything inside it belongs to you. I just need to retrieve my father's notes and belongings." "Oh," I asked casually, But her next words made my heart pound violently. Inside the Black Tesseract is a space dozens of meters wide, containing a lot of supplies my father prepared for the apocalypse, like food, fresh water, and clothes. Also, ever since my father got the Black Tesseract, there was already a type of metal inside. It's a metal that has never existed on Earth. It's 10 times heavier than steel, and its hardness far exceeds diamond. My father speculated that this metal was used to build the space battleship of that civilization, or it was a piece of the destroyed battleship itself, melted down and stored inside the Black Tesseract. What? Metal used to build a space battleship? I almost stopped breathing. This news struck me like a bolt of lightning. I had already confirmed that the Star Seed was the control center of a battleship, and its mission was to rebuild it. Every time the Star Seed upgraded the base vehicle, it required various types of metals. But I also knew very well, the metals on Earth had limited quality. They were only enough to build a base vehicle, an amphibious craft, or maybe a space station. But to create a super battleship capable of traversing black holes and conquering the universe? That was practically impossible. But now, the metal from that civilization's battleship was in the hands of the Jinsha commune. How could I not be thrilled? What could be more perfect than the very metal used to build the battleship itself? If I let the Star Seed absorb this, it might directly trigger its third evolution. What form would the Star Seed take then? I didn't even dare to imagine. You're interested in that metal? The girl was taken aback. Initially, when she mentioned the Black Tesseract, she only saw me slightly intrigued. But my reaction just now clearly exceeded her expectations. I already told you, that metal is incredibly hard. It's so hard it's almost impossible to process. Don't even think about using it to forge weapons. I'm a little interested, I smiled, trying to rein in my excitement. After all, there was no way she could guess that the Star Seed could directly absorb metal to evolve. I want the Black Tesseract, and I want the metal inside. The remaining food and mutated beast meat will all belong to you. Besides that, I can give you some mutated crystals as compensation. After looting Shanghai, my wealth had skyrocketed. These things were truly nothing to me. The girl agreed immediately. She knew very well that with her current strength, it was absolutely impossible to take back the Black Tesseract. Cooperating with me was still better than letting her father's treasure remain in the hands of his killer. Get in. Get in the car. We'll discuss the details. What's your name? My surname is Yi Yuekong. Yi Yuekong. I nodded, then turned to Shiyu. I'll leave Yi Yuekong's protection to you. I suspect someone has already locked onto her location using mental tracking. Rin Shiyu nodded, saying that as long as she kept her mental field open, she could block any external mental intrusion. By the time I walked over to Jiang Cheng, the giant mutated pangolin had already been dismantled by his brothers. Its massive tail was severed, and its head and limbs were being separated. A man nearly 1.9 meters tall, with bulging muscles, likely a strength type awakened, was using a large steel saw to cut through the steel-like scales. Nearby, others were clearing away the bodies. During the pangolin's ambush, just now, 6 people had died, 4 men and 2 women, including one of the female slaves I had just bought. Looking at the 6 bodies covered with white cloths in the pickup truck, I couldn't help but sigh. 10 minutes ago, they were still alive. Now, they were just cold corpses. In the apocalypse, this happened all too often. After every battle with mutated beasts, casualties were inevitable. The survivors didn't have time to mourn. They had to quickly process the monster's carcass to prevent the smell of blood from attracting more danger. This time, the deaths of those 6 people were, after all, connected to me. If I hadn't saved Yi Yuekong, the giant pangolin wouldn't have come. Thinking of that, I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. I waved my hand and told Jiang Cheng, just use your trucks to transport it. I only need the mutated crystal from this pangolin. Distribute the rest among the Longting brothers, especially the families of the 6 who died. Give them a larger share. This is what they traded their lives for. Jiang Cheng froze and hurriedly declined, saying that they all survived thanks to me, and they barely helped in the battle just now. I patted his shoulder, telling him that this monster was drawn here by my people. But Jiang Cheng laughed freely, saying that in this world, going out to hunt mutated beasts was their job. If we run into a monster we can't beat, we can only blame ourselves for not being strong enough. Seeing his attitude, I suddenly felt a sense of goodwill toward this man. I told them I would go back to the Longting base with them, as I wanted to learn more about the Jinsha society. Jiang Cheng happily agreed. Afterward, everyone quickly finished clearing the battlefield, and the level 2 mutated pangolin's crystal core also fell into my hands. Holding the dark red crystal core, which looked like fine wine, I could feel the blood in my body flowing faster. My veins seemed to hum faintly. It was as if they were being stimulated by this crystal core. Could it be? A thought flashed through my mind. I placed the crystal core against my forehead. Almost instantly, I felt the energy inside the crystal core continuously gathering and flooding into my body. I was absorbing the mutated crystal core. Previously, I had absorbed dozens of level 1 mutated crystal cores, completing my initial evolution and generating the blue energy. But after that, I always felt like I had hit a bottleneck. Even if a level 1 crystal core was placed right in front of me, I couldn't absorb any more. Yet now, just a single level 2 mutated crystal core was causing subtle new changes in my body. I held out my hand. The blue energy from the life matrix slowly gathered in my palm, forming a small blue energy sphere like a miniature sun. Before, this sphere was only the size of a fist, but after absorbing the level 2 crystal core, I noticed it had visibly grown a size larger. This filled me with joy. If this continued, the amount of energy I wielded would multiply, and my strength would skyrocket along with it. But right after, I felt a headache coming on. Before, to complete my evolution, I had to absorb dozens of level 1 crystal cores. Did that mean I now needed dozens of level 2 crystal cores? Thinking of this, I couldn't help but feel a heavy pressure. Level 2 mutated crystal cores weren't easy to find, and gathering a large number of them would be even harder. Even so, I had no other choice. With an enemy like Guang, I had to go all out to become stronger. Brother Jiang, up ahead is Longting City. Jiang Cheng pointed forward, saying a bit sheepishly. Calling it a city is a bit of a stretch. It's actually quite small. I looked ahead. Longting City was located in the rural area of Qiumingding. It was essentially just a small town built on the spot with stone and wood, surrounded by walls over 3 meters high. Compared to the Jinsha Society's safe zone, it was indeed far inferior. This is already very good. Just being able to establish a foothold here is no easy feat. I replied casually. Right at that moment, Shiyu's telepathic voice rang in my head. Brother Jiang, something's happening up ahead. I narrowed my eyes and looked closely. Sure enough, the town ahead was in chaos, and the faint sound of gunfire could be heard. Jiang Qing's expression also changed. They had shed a lot of blood and sweat to clear the Qiumingding area and build Longting. Things had been relatively peaceful for the past month or two. He didn't expect a battle to break out today. Without waiting for orders, the convoy immediately sped up, rushing straight toward Longting City. As we got closer, I could clearly see the whole picture. Longting City was under siege. Over 20 black SUVs were parked, blocking the city gates. They were all modified vehicles with weapons mounted on the roofs, and some even had anti-aircraft machine guns. A man holding an RPG fired straight at the city wall. An explosion echoed, and the already fragile wall was instantly destroyed. At that moment, I recognized a familiar face. It was Xia Mei's brother, the tattooed thug I had previously beaten into a cripple. He had bandages wrapped around his waist, his eyes bloodshot like a madman. I suddenly understood. In his eyes, I belonged to Longting. This was a blood feud, and he wanted to wipe out Longting to kill me and vent his anger. What surprised me was that the force he brought was too strong, almost like a reinforced battalion, and at least half of them were awakened. Could he be a trusted subordinate of some big shot in the Jinsha Society? I said in a low voice. Ing, who was beside me, also saw the problem. She replied softly that perhaps the Jinsha Society had wanted to wipe out Longting for a long time, and this guy was just an excuse. While we were talking, a few more rockets were fired. A series of explosions rang out. Longting's city wall almost completely collapsed, and several guards were engulfed in flames, dying on the spot. A red-clothed awakened stood on the remaining section of the wall, shouting orders, but the only response he got was another rocket. He managed to jump off the wall just in time, dodging the fatal blow. That person was Captain Yuan Fei. He immediately ordered them to shrink the defense line and retreat into the residential area for guerrilla warfare. At the same time, he ordered the civilians to evacuate through the back gate, while all the awakened stayed behind to hold off the enemy. A female soldier reported that anti-aircraft machine guns were already blocking the back gate, and many people had died trying to clear a path. Yuan Fei gritted his teeth and ordered them to destroy it, knowing in his heart that Longting would inevitably suffer heavy losses today. Right at that moment, the girl in military uniform suddenly pointed into the distance. Yuan Fei followed her gaze, and his eyes immediately lit up. Jiang Cheng had returned. With Jiang Cheng's team launching a surprise attack from the rear, they might actually have a chance to turn the tide. But right after, both Yuan Fei and the girl froze when they noticed a massive bus behind Jiang Cheng. On the roof of the bus, a giant, spiked metal block was secured with iron chains, looking incredibly menacing. The sunroof on the bus opened, and I leaped out, landing on the roof. I kicked hard, snapping the chains, then used one hand to lift a massive alloy plate half the size of a car. It was the mutated pangolin's helmet, weighing 7 or 8 tons, with 3 spikes over 2 meters long attached to the front. Without a moment's hesitation, I swung my arm and hurled it straight ahead. The massive metal block tore through the wind, soaring into the air. Before the Jinsha Society's men could even figure out what was happening, someone screamed in panic, telling everyone to run. But it was too late. The steel helmet smashed directly into an SUV. With a deafening crash, the entire vehicle was crushed flat like paper. Faced with a multi-ton block of metal hurtling at terrifying speed, anti-aircraft machine guns and RPGs were completely useless, pulverized in the blink of an eye. This scene left everyone utterly stunned. Yuan Fei, the girl in the military uniform, and even the men from the Jinsha Society, all of them stood there with their jaws dropped. This method of attack was simple and brutal, yet so effective it sent shivers down their spines. Yuan Fei looked at me, only one question echoing in his mind. Where on earth did Jiang Cheng find this terrifying powerhouse? Even Jiang Cheng stood frozen, gulping hard. Even though he had witnessed my strength firsthand, seeing me casually use a monster's helmet to smash the enemy's vehicles far exceeded his imagination. But he had to admit one thing. It felt good. It felt damn good. Not just Jiang Cheng, but even Yuan Fei slapped his thigh in excitement. They had been suppressed and forced back step by step, but my brutal strike just now had ignited the fighting spirit of everyone present. The Jinsha Society's men finally snapped out of it. Looking at the SUV crushed into scrap metal, they were filled with extreme fear and fury, and chaotic cursing erupted. The tattooed thug finally realized that the one attacking was me. The familiar bus, the face of the man who had stripped him of his manhood. Even if he were burned to ashes, he would never forget. He had originally brought his forces here not just to destroy Longting, but also to kill me. But now, facing me in person, that brutal strike just now struck genuine terror into his heart. I saw him. For scum like this, I didn't even bother wasting my breath. I just smirked in utter contempt. That smirk made the tattooed thug flinch. The memory of being crippled rushed back, and the phantom pain between his legs flared up again. He roared that I had only launched a sneak attack, and that I couldn't possibly unleash that kind of power again so soon, ordering his men to attack. But his voice cracked, because at that very moment, he watched me lift another massive alloy block, even larger than the helmet from before. It was the pangolin's back armor, terrifyingly heavy, yet in my hands, it looked as light as a brick. In an instant, every single member of the Jinsha Society felt their souls leave their bodies. Before they could even run, I hurled the massive back armor at their convoy with all my might. Another crash echoed as a second SUV was crushed into scrap, instantly killing everyone inside. In a panic, they aimed their RPGs and machine guns at the roof of the bus, but by then, I had already turned into a blur, charging straight at them. The iron chain in my hand whistled piercingly, carrying terrifying force as it whipped directly into the enemy vehicles. A machine gunner was sent flying before he could even react, his bones shattered and organs ruptured, collapsing into a pool of blood, twitching. I yanked the chain hard, lifting the massive helmet and swinging it around me like a giant meteor hammer. At this point, no one dared to get close. I swung the multi-ton steel helmet at the remaining vehicles, triggering a series of explosions. I was like a wolf charging into a flock of sheep. Under that overwhelming power, whether they were awakened or heavy weapons, everything was crushed like tofu. On the city wall, Yuan Fei's eyes were wide with disbelief. The girl in the military uniform stood frozen, her eyes glued to my figure as I ravaged the battlefield below. Yuan Fei couldn't help but exclaim that this was a complete massacre, then immediately roared, ordering a counterattack. Having been suppressed by the Jinsha Society for so long, Longting's pent-up hatred finally exploded. With me in the front and the Longting squad charging from behind, the Jinsha Society's men were completely crushed. They had the upper hand at first, but in the blink of an eye, they were routed, while the opposition was just me alone. Right then, a blinding flash of lightning tore through the sky. An SUV trying to reverse was instantly struck. The people inside charred black, smoke billowing out. A young woman covered in crackling electricity appeared. Ing smiled and said, "I'm here to help." In an instant, a massive electrical grid covered the battlefield, striking down simultaneously with my brutal smashes. The Jinsha Society completely lost all ability to resist. All they could do was scream in agony and scatter in panic. Just then, Shiyu's grave voice echoed in my mind, warning me that several extremely powerful mental signatures were rapidly approaching. My heart skipped a beat. Whoever was coming at this moment was definitely not a friend. It was highly likely the puppet master. His target wasn't to save these people, but Yi Wekong and the Stone Shadow squad who had killed his giant pangolin. I stopped and looked into the distance. The surviving members of the Jinsha Society were completely broken and quickly surrounded. Yuan Fei looked across the ruined battlefield, feeling nothing but a lingering chill. Jiang Cheng ran over excitedly, about to introduce me to everyone. The girl in the military uniform followed closely, her eyes full of curiosity and admiration. Up close, no one would think I had just caused such a brutal scene. Tall and lean, wearing a long coat, with a clean-cut face, I didn't look like a killing machine at all. I cut Jiang Cheng off, telling them to be careful because someone was coming, and it was very likely another puppet beast like the pangolin from before. Hearing this, both Jiang Cheng and the girl in the military uniform turned pale. Right then, frantic cursing erupted from the Jinsha Society prisoners. The tattooed thug was still alive, but he had nowhere left to run. Knowing he was definitely going to die, he cursed desperately. But when my gaze swept over him, his entire body trembled violently, fear choking his throat. He yelled that the society would take revenge. I just smiled coldly and told him he'd soon get to see the ones coming to avenge them. Those words left him stunned. I didn't bother looking at him anymore. My entire focus was on the approaching enemy. Just half a minute later, a few black dots appeared in the sky northwest of Cheomingding. At first, I thought it was another giant ground monster, but to my surprise, it was something that could fly. There was no engine noise, but their shapes became clearer, giant black monsters with wings. A piercing screech echoed, like a radio filled with static, absolutely deafening. When Shiyu blurted out that they were bats, I narrowed my eyes, my heart turning cold. Their wingspan was at least 10 meters. 10 meters might sound vague, but if this monster actually landed, just one of its wings would be enough to cover a small car. Compared to those massive wings, its body was a bit smaller, but still as large as a full-grown tiger. With those razor-sharp teeth, it could easily bite through steel. It was truly a winged beast of prey. I couldn't help but think of the creatures that ruled the skies in ancient times, the pterosaurs, specifically the Quetzalcoatlus. It was the largest flying animal ever discovered by humans, with a wingspan also exceeding 10 meters. Although the Quetzalcoatlus had a much longer neck and stood as tall as a giraffe, in terms of weight, it probably couldn't compare to these giant bats soaring in the sky. It was hard to imagine how such monsters even managed to take flight. What the hell were these things? Jiang Cheng was completely dumbfounded. Did such monsters really exist in this country? Today he had seen a giant pangolin with his own eyes, and now he was looking at giant flying bats. Everything happening before his eyes had far surpassed his understanding. Jiang Cheng suddenly felt how insignificant his own strength was. Absolutely nothing compared to this vast world. If even he felt this way, the people of Longting were even more terrified. They had never witnessed a scene like this. Those giant flying beasts could probably swoop down, snatch a lion into the air, and tear it to pieces. In stark contrast, the tattooed thug was so excited he was almost going mad when he saw the sight. Shinfeng beasts. They really are Shinfeng beasts. Are these the Shinfeng beasts? I actually get to see the Shinfeng beasts. The thug was so thrilled he was babbling incoherently. This surprised me. I didn't expect him to recognize the flying monsters in the sky. I knew that in this country, the Shinfeng was revered, almost like a spiritual belief. In ancient times, when the mighty Mongol army swept across Eurasia and attempted to invade this country, they were decimated by a typhoon, saving the nation from destruction. That typhoon was called the Shinfeng. Later, during World War II, this country even formed the Shinfeng suicide squads, carrying that same spirit. Now, this tattooed thug was calling these bats Shinfeng beasts and worshipping them like gods. That alone showed that to the Jinsha society, and perhaps even a faction of underworld organizations in this country, these bats held almost religious significance. It also clearly demonstrated the terrifying extent of the Guang organization's influence here. Even though Guang was an international organization, it seemed unable to penetrate deeply into China, as the social system there was too difficult to infiltrate. But in this country, it was completely different. One of the puppet beasts controlled by a Guang council member had actually become a worshipped divine beast. Shinfeng beasts. The Shinfeng beasts are here to save us. Another member of the Jinsha society screamed. Earlier, I had scared the living daylights out of them. When they saw me swinging that giant meteor hammer, they didn't even dare to fight back. But now, seeing the Shinfeng beasts appear, their morale instantly surged. They scrambled to pick up their weapons and resume the fight. Bastards! I'll wipe that smug look off their faces. When Tian, shoot it down. That'll shut them up. Yuan Fei shouted loudly. The person he called out to was the girl in the military uniform standing next to him. Her name sounded gentle, but her actions were anything but cute. Receiving the order, she didn't say a word and immediately pulled a massive sniper rifle from her back, a Barrett. This was the anti-material sniper rifle used by the U.S. military, battle-tested in the Gulf War, famous for its extreme power and accuracy, with a reputation far exceeding the AWM. A petite girl holding such a massive gun created a striking contrast. Before the apocalypse, even tall, burly Special Forces soldiers could only fire this weapon prone. If fired standing, the massive recoil was like an air cannon, enough to leave one's shoulder aching for weeks. Yet now, when Tian easily aimed straight at the giant bat and pulled the trigger, even using armor-piercing rounds, bullets capable of piercing 35mm thick steel from 500 meters away. From loading and aiming to firing, everything happened in a split second. Bang! The deafening gunshot rang out, piercing clearly through the chaotic battlefield. The armor-piercing bullet tore through the wind in a perfectly straight trajectory, hitting the giant bat right in the head. A perfect headshot. But before Wen Tian could even celebrate, her expression froze. The bat merely tilted its head back slightly, then continued flying straight toward Lungting City. What's going on? Did she miss? Wen Tian couldn't believe it. Her awakened ability was directly related to marksmanship. She absolutely refused to believe she had missed. If it were a ground-based mutated beast with thick armor, it would be understandable, but this was a bat. Its entire body was just skin and fur, clearly light armor. Armor-piercing rounds could pierce through thick steel, so how could a body of flesh and blood withstand it? Right at that moment, Yuan Fei suddenly lunged forward, shoving her hard to the ground. "Watch out," he roared. Almost simultaneously, a violent tremor struck the spot where they had just been standing. The stone slab beneath their feet vibrated, then instantly turned into fine dust, blown away by the wind. The sight sent a shiver down Wen Tian's spine. What kind of attack was that? It's ultrasonic waves. Yuan Fei immediately deduced. When ultrasonic waves reach a certain intensity, they can shatter objects. This phenomenon is known as ultrasonic destruction. In medicine, ultrasonic waves are used to break down kidney stones, but that process takes quite a bit of time. Yet right before their eyes, a solid rock was pulverized in an instant. It was truly unimaginable. This is a sonic attack, specifically focused sonic waves. These bats can coordinate with each other, focusing their ultrasonic waves to prevent them from dispersing, thereby creating massive destructive power. Rin Shiyu's voice echoed in the minds of the entire Stone Shadow squad. When humans speak, sound usually scatters in all directions, and its intensity decreases by the square of the distance, because most waves propagate in a spherical pattern. But once sound waves are focused, the attenuation is extremely low. It's like rolling up a book and speaking into it. Even if you can't hear it clearly yourself, the person on the other end can. It was hard to believe how these bats had mutated to be able to emit directional sonic waves. With sonic waves of that intensity, if a body of flesh and blood took a direct hit, it would definitely be crushed. "Ing, get on the base vehicle quickly," I said sternly. The base vehicle had incredibly strong defenses, enough to isolate the ultrasonic waves. Ing gritted her teeth, not stubbornly staying behind, and immediately jumped onto the vehicle. "Be careful." In the Stone Shadow squad right now, I was the only one strong enough. She could only put her trust in me, because if she stayed, she would only distract me. The moment Ing got on the vehicle, a sense of danger washed over me again. Without thinking, I immediately lunged forward. Crack, crack, crack. The ground where I had just been standing crumbled into fine dust, looking even worse than the attack Yuan Fei had just endured. The ultrasonic waves emitted by the bat swarm were completely silent. It was an invisible attack. Not only that, but the speed of the sonic waves was so fast it far exceeded the reflexes of an awakened, and the attack range was extremely wide. Even if you could see it, dodging would be incredibly difficult, let alone when it was invisible. This was truly a silent Grim Reaper. Before you even realized it, death was already upon you. I was only able to completely dodge it thanks to my instinctual danger perception. To reach this level of intuition, one had to be at least a top-tier level 2 awakened. Just a beat too slow, and the ground beneath my feet exploded again, but I still managed to dodge in time. The moment I leaped up, I suddenly felt a chill down my spine. Without thinking, I twisted my body mid-air, using the iron chain in my hand to change direction, gliding in a way that completely defied the laws of physics. The stone wall right where I was about to land shook violently. It was as if thousands of years of weathering had been compressed into a single moment, collapsing into dust. Seeing that, cold sweat broke out on my back. These bats weren't just coordinating, they were locking down my escape routes. One would feign an attack to force me to move, while another waited at my most likely evasion path. If I had actually landed there, I would have been crushed for sure. This was absolutely not the intelligence of wild beasts. It was highly likely the puppet master controlling them from afar, a council member of the Guang organization. Truly terrifying. Even though my intuition was sharp, it consumed a massive amount of stamina. If the bats kept unleashing these invisible attacks, I wouldn't be able to hold out. Just one small mistake, and I would never get a chance to fix it. Die! I roared, suddenly whipping the iron chain hard, detaching it from the giant pangolin's helmet. Then, using the thick chain like a steel whip, I lashed it straight at the bat swarm in the sky. The chain tore through the air with a piercing shriek, but the bats had anticipated my move and immediately gained altitude. The chain only grazed their bellies. It wasn't long enough. I frowned. My biggest weakness right now was that I couldn't fly, so I had no way to attack them. "Brother Jiang, let me help you," Xiang Shuahai shouted, about to rush out of the base vehicle. With her wind powers, I could take to the skies. "Don't come out." I immediately refused. I knew Xiang Shuahai intended to use her wind to lift me up so I could attack the bats, but that method was completely unfeasible. Their sonic waves were too strong. We simply couldn't fight against them mid-air. Xiang Shuahai could sense danger to herself, but she couldn't accurately perceive the danger I was facing. How could she possibly control my flight safely? Once I was in the air, I would lose all leverage. That was also why, even though the chain wasn't long enough, I didn't risk jumping into the sky. "But Brother Jiang," Xiang Shuahai looked at me anxiously, her voice urgent. I joined the squad to provide aerial support. If I don't act now, what use am I? I could clearly see the unease in her eyes. She also knew her strength wasn't enough to deal with 4 bats at once. I didn't answer, because right now, I had no time. Another wave of sonic attacks came crashing down. Realizing that targeting my weak points was no longer effective, The four bats began using wide-area ultrasonic sweeps, as if their energy was limitless. Boom! A violent explosion erupted behind me. A Longting SUV, which Jiang Chung had just brought out, exploded without any warning. The steel frame twisted, the windows shattered into dust, and the people inside were crushed into a bloody pulp before they could even react. Liangzi! Jiang Chung screamed in agony, his eyes bloodshot. He was the strongest in his squad, yet he could only vaguely predict danger. Besides him, no one else had that ability. They were all just sitting ducks. Even the people inside Longting City couldn't escape it. Shenfeng beasts. Ha! Shenfeng beasts. The tattooed thug laughed like a maniac. The divine beasts worshipped by the Jiansha society, things he had only heard of in legends or seen in pictures, were finally displaying their true power. To him, the Lord Overseer of the society was truly invincible. Watch out. Everyone get out of the cars. Get out and scatter immediately. Jiang Chung roared. The Longting members didn't say a word, abandoning their vehicles and fleeing in all directions. In this situation, huddling inside a car was no different from suicide. But even though they scattered, they still couldn't escape the frantic sweeps of the focused ultrasonic waves. In the blink of an eye, several people were hit and turned into mangled flesh. Damn it! Go to hell. A Longting member picked up an RPG dropped by the Jiansha Society, aimed it at the sky, and fired at the giant bats. Armor-piercing rounds might not work, but rockets were a different story. However, the rocket's trajectory was too obvious. Halfway through its flight, it was struck by a sonic wave and exploded midair. The sonic wave continued its sweep, slamming straight into the man holding the launcher. Before he could even cry out, his internal organs ruptured, and he died on the spot. Bastards! Jiang Chung gritted his teeth, watching the slaughter helplessly. This battle wasn't a skirmish at all, it was a one-sided massacre. Even so, the bat's main target was always me. Boom! Right then, a deep explosion echoed from the base vehicle. The air cannon fired. A terrifying blast of air mixed with black energy swept across the sky. This attack was controlled by Ying. Ever since it fused with the black hole energy, the air cannon's power was completely different from before. Even though it weakened after traveling hundreds of meters, its destructive force was still incredibly terrifying. One bat tried to dodge, but was still hit in the wing. Flesh and blood exploded, leaving a massive hole in its 10-meter wingspan. It thrashed wildly, almost falling, but the other three quickly grabbed it, helping it stay afloat. Great job, Ying cheered excitedly from inside the vehicle. Since I stepped out to fight, the base vehicle's controls had been handed over to Ying, and she never disappointed. She always delivered the strongest strike at the most crucial moment. But contrary to the praise, Ying's expression was extremely grave. She noticed the wing membrane around the wound shrinking, as if it was healing itself. The other three bats immediately moved their injured comrade behind the base vehicle into the cannon's blind spot. If she turned the vehicle around, they would just dodge and maintain that position, and the injured bat would heal. That attack would have been for nothing. Moreover, the air cannon using black hole energy couldn't be fired recklessly. Right now, out of the four bats, only one was injured. This was their only chance, but the remaining three were still capable of emitting ultrasonic waves. They were absolutely not easy targets. Right at that moment, I suddenly dashed forward, crossing hundreds of meters in just a few steps, and landed firmly on the city wall. Both Yuan Fei and Wen Tian were stunned. It was me. The sight of me using an iron chain to swing a multi-ton helmet and smash the Jiansha Society's SUVs was still burned into their memories. That brutal and fierce fighting style, visually shocking to the core, was something they would probably never forget for the rest of their lives. Now that I appeared right in front of them, it felt as if a ferocious beast had just descended. Give me the gun. I pointed straight at the Barrett in Wen Tian's hands. She froze, handing the gun to me. You want to shoot the bats? But this gun won't work on them. I frowned, my voice sharp. Hurry up. Standing near me will get you crushed by the ultrasonic waves. Fine, but my gun doesn't have a scope, Wen Tian replied, looking incredulous. Her awakened ability was tied to marksmanship. Using a sniper rifle without a scope, relying only on iron sights, was faster for her. But how could anyone else do that? You talk too much, I snapped in annoyance. The bats were healing, and I had no patience for this hesitation. When Tian choked on her words, but ultimately tossed the Barrett and 2 magazines to me, one with armor-piercing incendiary rounds and one with standard armor-piercing rounds. I chose the standard armor-piercing rounds because their penetration power was the strongest. If it couldn't pierce through, incendiary rounds would be useless anyway. Actually, what I needed wasn't the gun, but her ammo. My M2 only used standard rounds, and the power of a sniper rifle largely depended on the bullets. These special armor-piercing rounds were completely different. Stay away, or you'll be crushed into meat paste, I said coldly. When Tian's face paled. In Longting, she was practically a princess, always treated with respect. She had never been shooed away so bluntly. But she still quickly backed away, not daring to get in the way. Yuan Fei also smiled bitterly and distanced himself. They watched me load the armor-piercing rounds into the gun, their minds full of doubt. When Tian had just tried shooting, and it was completely ineffective. What difference would it make if I held the gun? A gun isn't like throwing a spear. Physical arm strength can't increase a bullet's power. No matter how strong I was, I couldn't change that fact. Right after, I raised the gun. I didn't even aim. I just pulled the trigger. Bang! The gunshot left when Tian dumbfounded. As the #1 sniper, even she needed at least a second to aim. No scope, just iron sights and intuition. Even special forces would find it unimaginable. But I was different. I shot without even looking. In that moment, when Tian suddenly remembered an old gaming joke. Watch out. I'm about to open my eyes to play. For me, it was no longer a joke. While when Tian was still lost in thought, she completely missed the armor-piercing bullet that had just been fired, leaving a long, thin trail of blue light tearing through the air. The light flashed by incredibly fast, like a stroke from a god's brush slashing across the sky. It split the space in two against the dark blue sky, so fast that almost no one noticed its existence. I had channeled blue light energy into the bullet. That energy could originally amplify the power of my punches, and this time, I tried infusing it into the bullet to multiply its destructive force. The result exceeded my expectations. A standard armor-piercing bullet, accelerated by the blue light energy, reached a speed 10 times the speed of sound, far surpassing any rifle bullet, carrying a terrifying amount of kinetic energy. A deep explosion echoed in midair. One of the uninjured giant bats suddenly convulsed violently as the bullet pierced straight through its head. Half of its head instantly exploded, a large chunk of its skull blown away. Blood and brains splattered, turning into a rain of red and white in the sky. This happened so suddenly that no one had time to react. They had assumed my shot would be useless, never expecting that a single bullet would blow straight through the bat's head. From hundreds of meters away, in the blink of an eye, I had executed a fatal shot. That aiming ability and reaction speed far surpassed even when Tian's. In that moment, many couldn't help but wonder, was there really a better sniper in this world than her? Before this, they had only seen me as an awakened who relied on physical strength. But now, they realized my marksmanship was equally terrifying. Just how many abilities did I possess? And the most baffling part was, it was the exact same gun, but in my hands. The difference in power was unbelievable. Everyone stared blankly at the falling rain of blood. The giant bat stiffened for a split second, then plummeted straight down from the sky. The other 3 bats watched helplessly as their comrade's corpse fell. Smash! The heavy body, with its 10-meter wingspan, slammed into the ground, sending dirt and rocks flying. Half of its head was gone. There was clearly no way it could survive. This scene completely confirmed the horrifying power of that shot. Everyone's jaws dropped, unable to close for a long time. It felt just like playing a video game. Both were hunters, both used the same gun. Except I was decked out in top-tier gear, while when Tian looked like she had just stepped out of the beginner's village. Even I didn't expect the shot to be that powerful. The blue light energy in my body had pushed the bullet's speed to 4 or 5 times its normal velocity. And since a bullet's kinetic energy is proportional to the square of its speed, the power was increased by roughly 20 times. More importantly, the bullet was further reinforced by the blue light energy itself. I calmly looked at the 3 remaining bats in the sky, unlocked the bolt, ejected the casing, and loaded a new round. This Barrett was the 1999 version, requiring manual reloading. The fire rate was slower, but it maximized the bullet's power and had a longer barrel. For me, the fire rate wasn't an issue. Every shot required time to pump in the blue light energy and consumed a massive amount of stamina, so rapid firing was impossible anyway. Roar! Screech! The three giant bats shrieked. The two uninjured ones immediately let go of the wounded one, splitting to the sides, their throats vibrating at high frequencies. I didn't hesitate and leaped into the air. Ultrasonic waves, 10 times stronger than before, swept over, collapsing a large section of the city wall behind me. I did a mid-air flip. The moment my feet touched the ground, without even looking, the Barrett in my hand spat out a long tongue of fire. Boom! Another explosion. Another mutated bat had its skull pierced by a bullet. The back half of its head was blown away, and another rain of blood poured down. The second Shinfeng beast fell from the sky. The remaining two immediately panicked, including the one with the injured wing. They flapped their wings frantically, trying to flee. I didn't give them the chance. Chasing them mid-air, I fired the third shot. The third Shinfeng beast plummeted. 5 seconds later, the fourth shot rang out. The bullet pierced through the back of the last bat's head. Its body tumbled and fell straight down. Boom! Boom! The two massive bodies crashed down one after another, creating two deep craters in the ground. Both of their heads were pierced through, completely dead. All of Longting fell into absolute silence. If they hadn't personally experienced the massacre earlier, they could never have imagined that these terrifying Shinfeng beasts would be killed by me so cleanly. When Tion's sniper rifle, and even RPGs, couldn't pose a threat, but in my hands, they dropped one by one like shooting birds. Jiangcheng looked at the gun in my hand, his mind inevitably associating it with a sci-fi weapon, a railgun that used electromagnetic force to accelerate bullets to extreme speeds. Perhaps only a weapon like that could produce such terrifying power. There was no doubt anymore. I possessed a special ability that could enhance the power of bullets, and it was at an incredibly high level. That meant I wasn't just as strong as a mutated beast in close combat, but I could also enhance firepower, with sniping skills that even surpassed Tion's. An all-around warrior like this, saying he could wipe out an entire army single-handedly wouldn't be hard to believe. Those shots of yours were truly invincible. Ing, still in shock, walked up to me and carefully checked to see if I was injured. You used the blue light energy, didn't you? I nodded. For consecutive shots had drained a lot of my stamina, especially the last one, where the power had noticeably decreased. Luckily, it was still enough to kill the last one. Good thing you absorbed that giant pangolin's crystal core earlier, otherwise you probably wouldn't have held up. I let out a breath, already planning in my mind that I needed to get even stronger and fast. Ing, tell Jiangcheng's people to handle the corpses of these 4 bats. I only need the mutated crystal cores. Leave the meat. I had no interest in bat meat, and I certainly didn't want to bring it back for the girls on the vehicle. As for the giant pangolin, though, that was a different story. I planned to bring along as much of its meat as I could carry. As for what comes next, I spoke while glancing toward the tattooed man. After the battle, the remaining forces of the kamikaze commune had completely lost their will to fight. The tattooed man's face was deathly pale, his body trembling uncontrollably. He couldn't believe that the sacred kamikaze beasts he worshipped had been wiped out by me so effortlessly. He had been convinced those sacred beasts would crush Longting, but the outcome was the exact opposite. As I approached him, he let out a miserable, pathetic smile. In his eyes, I was nothing short of a demon, someone who had just shattered his entire belief system. Knowing he had no chance of survival, and having lost any desire to live ever since his manhood was ruined, he prepared to commit seppuku. But right at that moment, my gun went off. The armor-piercing round punched right through him like thin paper, snapping his spine. It didn't tear his body apart, leaving only a single bloody hole, so he didn't die immediately. The excruciating pain of a shattered spine left him twitching violently on the ground. Eyes wide with rage and disbelief, his furious glare remained locked on me. He didn't hate me for losing. He hated me because I didn't even give him the chance to die an honorable death. A petty gangster like you thinks he deserves to commit seppuku? I said coldly. Japanese samurai spend their lives seeking a glorious death. Seppuku is meant to preserve dignity. A scumbag like you, who does nothing but rape and pillage, is pure trash. Someone like that doesn't deserve an honorable death. Once the tattooed guy finally breathed his last, clearing the battlefield became much easier. Most of the remaining members of the kamikaze commune chose not to commit suicide. Instead, they laid down their weapons one by one and surrendered. Brother Jiang, I honestly don't even know what to say this time. Saved by you again. Jiang Chung drove over and hopped out, shock still written all over his face. Wen Dian and Yuan Fei followed right behind him. Yuan Fei looked at me with clear respect in his eyes, then turned to Jiang Chung. Ah Chung, who is this? Jiang Chung nodded and gave a quick introduction, explaining that I was the one who used 3 mutated cores to buy back Xiao Wen and the others. And on top of that, I had handed them over willingly without asking for cores in return. He then introduced Yuan Fei as the commander-in-chief of Longting City and Wen Dian as their sniper. Hearing that, Wen Dian felt a bit embarrassed. She stuck out her tongue with a self-deprecating smile, saying she felt like she'd just been playing with a toy gun. Her eyes unconsciously drifted to the sniper rifle in my hands, a gun that had originally belonged to her, one whose every component she knew by heart. Yet she couldn't understand how it could unleash such terrifying power the moment it was in my hands. After a moment's hesitation, she asked if she could take a look at it. I chuckled and tossed it straight back to her. When Dian caught the nearly 20-kilogram Barrett with one hand and skillfully began field stripping it. Yuan Fei frowned and asked what she was doing, but when Dian paid him no mind, merely muttering to herself that all the parts were exactly the same. Nothing had been modified. She knew doing this was a bit impolite, almost like she was probing into my abilities. But as someone with a shooting-related superpower, she simply couldn't hold back her overwhelming curiosity and admiration. I just smiled and told Yuan Fei it was no big deal, just a little technique applied when firing, and left it at that without further explanation. By now, the Longting people had already started processing the corpses of the 4 giant bats. Zero and Ing nimbly used their daggers to extract 4 mutated cores. These were all top-grade tier, 2 mutated beast cores, possessing exceptional quality. Holding them in my hand, I could clearly feel the surging energy resonating with my bloodline. A wave of excitement surged within me, making me wish I could absorb them right then and there. Feeling a bit guilty, Yuan Fei offered to buy the remaining bat carcasses using cores and evolution crystals. He just asked for some time to gather them, since Longting City was truly strapped for resources. I waved my hand in refusal, pointing out that I was the one who lured those 4 bats over in the first place. Even that tattooed bastard showed up because of me, costing Longting quite a few brothers. I've already taken the cores, so the rest belongs to you guys. Yuan Fei still looked uneasy, but I smiled and added, if it really bothers you, just let me keep this Barrett and some ammunition. Wen Dian was slightly caught off guard, but she decisively tossed the rifle back to me, saying that only in my hands could it unleash its full potential. I caught the Barrett and handed over my familiar AMR-2 rifle to Ing, swapping it for her. To me, the most crucial element was the steel core armor-piercing ammunition, which synthesized best with my blue light energy. Wen Dian let out a breath of relief. Holding the AMR-2, she offered a genuine word of thanks. Exhaustion was finally catching up to me, so I said goodbye to Jiang Chung and left. Instead of entering Longting City, I drove my base vehicle to the threshing floor out back. Once the vehicle doors sealed shut, only Li Yusin and Rin Xiu were left inside with me, one a doctor, and the other possessing psychokinetic abilities. Together, they were more than enough to handle any situation while I absorbed the energy. Taking a deep breath, I pressed the first mutated core against my forehead. Searing hot like a burning ember, waves of power flooded into my meridians. Agony racked my entire body, yet it was accompanied by an indescribable thrill. The quality of the kamikaze beast's core far surpassed that of the giant pangolin. For my blue light energy, it was a supreme tonic. I could clearly feel my strength soaring as my body underwent a profound cleansing. An hour later, I finished absorbing the first core and immediately moved on to the second. As time went on, sweat poured off me in torrents. My body burned red hot, pores opening wide as intense steam billowed upward. For hours slipped by. By the time night fell, I had finally absorbed all 4 cores. My body had evolved once more, muscles denser, skin tougher and lustrous. Impurities were forced out through my pores, leaving behind a foul, pungent odor. Flush-faced and panting heavily, my meridians felt somewhat worn down after enduring such high-intensity energy for so long. Li Yusin gently removed my clothes and helped me into the bathroom. Blushing crimson, Rin Xiu joined her in preparing the water. Enveloped in their gentle care, I gradually drifted off to sleep. When I opened my eyes, it was already the next morning. Li Yusin and Rin Xiu were lying on either side of me, fast asleep in their soft nightwear. Looking at their serene faces, a rare sense of deep satisfaction filled my heart. With my base vehicle, no worries about survival, and companions by my side, I even thought I might be the happiest man in the apocalypse. Rin Xiu woke up shortly after, as her telepathic force field was constantly active. I gently caressed her cheek and said we were heading out today for the kamikaze commune. Whether to seek revenge on Shungwei or to compete for the Black Demon Cube, this trip was inevitable. I knew word about me had surely reached the ears of the Light Organization. Rather than waiting for them to hunt me down, I might as well make the first move. At 8 in the morning, under heavy gray clouds, a light drizzle fell over the chaotic market of the kamikaze commune. Stalls cobbled together from tarps and rusted corrugated iron looked like nothing more than a slum from a distance. Over in the slave section of the morning market, Fujita had pulled a tarp over the female slaves, not out of kindness, but out of fear they'd catch sick and die. As for him, just like any other day, he sat bare-chested and bloated in a battered armchair, whip in hand, lazily waiting for buyers. In Fujita's experience, morning customers were rare, but this time was different. He spotted a familiar large bus slowly rolling into the kamikaze commune's safe zone. Wasn't that the vehicle of the guy who bought 6 female slaves from Huaxia with 3 mutated cores last time? My ride was just too recognizable. In the apocalypse, who in their right mind drove a luxury bus everywhere? It was a gas-guzzling waste of space. That fat sheep is back. Overjoyed, Fujita jumped up and waved at me. He still had 2 female slaves from Huaxia left and planned to use this chance to gouge me. In his eyes, I was a gullible fool who'd easily part with a few more cores. Hey kid, looking to buy some slaves? Just brought in 11 new girls yesterday. 2 of them were exchange students from back home. How about it? Want to take a few back for some fun? Fujita smirked lewdly. Ing brought the vehicle to a stop. I paused for a second before recognizing the fat bastard. I had come today to wipe out the kamikaze commune and originally intended to head straight in, but running into him felt like starting with a nice appetizer. Oh, 11 female slaves. I let out a dry chuckle. That's right. Every single one is top grade, and 3 of them are untouched virgins. He flashed 3 fingers. Just 3 mutated cores, and you can take the whole lot. He knew I was a cash cow and figured it'd be a waste not to milk me. That price works. I turned my palm over and produced 3 cores. Fujita's eyes instantly lit up. He hadn't expected me to agree so easily. In the apocalypse, 11 female slaves were worth 1 core at most, if anyone even bothered buying them at all. Running into a fool who was as gullible as he was lustful made him feel like he'd hit the absolute jackpot. Yes, I kept these goods set aside just for you, sir. If you ever need more slaves, just come find me. Here's my card. Before he could even pull out his business card, I cut in. No need. Here's your core. I flicked a core out. The tiny stone whistled through the air like a bullet, leaving a vivid blue trail. It punched straight through Fujita's chest, piercing his heart and blasting out his back in a shower of blood. His body jerked violently. He stared at me in dazed shock, then looked down at his own chest. Blood gushed from the gruesome wound with every heartbeat, but after just a few beats, it stopped cold. Agony surged through him, contorting his face as his body collapsed. In his final moments, he saw the blood-stained core glowing soft blue as it slowly flew right back into my hand. Flicking a core to kill someone? Fujita couldn't believe it. Even as he died, his face was stuck in utter bewilderment. Murder. Someone from the kamikaze commune got killed, someone yelled. In the slave market, The female slave stared at me in terror and numb shock. Was I really the one who had just killed Fujita? In their eyes, Fujita held their lives and destinies in his hands, yet he had died in a mere instant. You're free now. Wait here for a few hours, and Longting's people will arrive. Regardless of your nationality, you can join Longting. Or if you prefer, you can join one of the other factions in Japan. Wakayama wasn't just home to the kamikaze commune. There were plenty of smaller factions barely scraping by under their oppression. Once kamikaze collapses, they'll finally be able to breathe, even if none of them can compete with Longting in the end. In the apocalypse, the struggle for survival knows no right or wrong. Nationalism at a time like this is nothing more than an excuse. Seize him. He killed someone. Don't let him get away. The morning market instantly erupted into chaos. Slaves scattered in panic, while kamikaze members rushed forward with swords and guns. I simply pushed off and leaped back onto the vehicle, idly playing with the core in my hand. Coating the core in blue light energy to kill someone was a trick I already knew. But pulling the core back into my hand was a brand new ability from my second evolution, telekinesis. It wasn't fully perfected yet, but I was confident that as time went on and my power grew, this ability would become truly terrifying. Hold that man right there. He's the one who killed Fujita. Step out of the vehicle. Get down now. The morning market guard unit swarmed over, pointing every gun barrel directly at my base vehicle. Sitting calmly in the passenger seat, I looked at them and said, Shiyu. Rin Shiyu nodded faintly, expanding her telepathic force field to link with my brainwaves and project a message directly to everyone. Everyone back off. In 3 seconds, anyone still pointing a weapon at me will be treated as an enemy and eliminated. I wasn't bloodthirsty. Even in the kamikaze commune, the only ones who deserved death were the ruling leaders. The common folk were innocent. 3 seconds, a fierce-looking middle-aged man with a machine gun slung over his shoulder sneered contemptuously. We don't need 3 seconds. You killed my guy, so I'm sending you straight to hell right now. He pulled the trigger without hesitation. He was the captain of a special team, and Fujita was his business partner. Any slaves they captured were handed off to Fujita to be sold for cash. With Fujita dead, his cash cow was gone. Kill him. The 7 or 8 men behind him opened fire at once. Machine guns and rifles roared. A storm of bullets rained onto the base vehicle's windshield, producing nothing more than harmless sparks. The vehicle had been reinforced again and again. How could regular bullets ever breach it? Clack, clack, clack. Some bullets ricocheted. The soft core ones deformed, while the hard steel core bullets bounced back at almost their original speed. In the crowd, several people screamed in agony as the ricocheting bullets struck them. Some died on the spot, while others collapsed, critically injured. Run! The panicked crowd scattered in all directions. The market instantly descended into chaos, with people pushing and trampling each other, leaving many injured. A bulletproof vehicle? The middle-aged man's eyes widened in shock. Normal bulletproof glass would shatter under machine gun fire, yet this bus only had a few white scratch marks. Since you all have a death wish, I'll gladly grant it. As soon as the words fell, the MCV erupted with a massive surge of blue electricity. Crackle! The blue-purple lightning arched like giant snakes, completely engulfing the middle-aged man's squad. The weaker ones were instantly charred to a crisp. The stronger ones were left paralyzed, convulsing and foaming at the mouth. Even if they didn't die immediately, they wouldn't live much longer. What is this? The remaining guards went weak in the knees, turning around and fleeing for their lives. It was a guaranteed death sentence. Who would dare risk their lives now? Right at that moment, Ing slammed on the gas. The MCV roared like a beast, charging straight toward the headquarters of the Inspection Society. Hazuki had thoroughly investigated the headquarters location beforehand. The vehicle plowed straight ahead, surrounded by an electrical field. Anyone who got close was struck by the current, lightly injured at best, dead at worst. Boom. Following Hazuki's directions, the vehicle smashed through a concrete wall. Rubble flew everywhere as the barbed wire fence was torn to shreds. Like an unchained beast, the MCV charged right into the safe inner city, where the Inspection Society's headquarters was located. Bang! 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 Bullets rained down from all sides, but the vehicle tore through the hail of gunfire like a bolt of lightning. Swoosh! An ear-piercing screech echoed as two RPGs rocketed toward them. These were highly destructive anti-tank missiles, enough to make even a tank hesitate. If they hit, the MCV would definitely take heavy damage, and breaking down here meant certain death. I didn't hesitate. With a flick of my wrist, two steel marbles shot out the window. Infused with blue light energy, they whistled through the air, accurately striking the warheads of the two rockets right at the detonators. The two RPGs exploded midair. A terrifying shockwave swept through the surroundings, instantly blowing the nearby Inspection Society members to pieces. By the time the shockwave reached the MCV, it had completely dissipated. The vehicle tore through the sea of fire, heading straight for the main building. At that moment, Ing pressed the button. The air cannon, which had been charging up energy, unleashed its full power. The black hole energy merged with the supersonic airflow, forming a strike like a divine blade slashing straight ahead. The metal doors at the front of the building exploded. The two iron doors, weighing hundreds of kilos, were blown away, completely mangled. The MCV charged right inside. Stop him! A few Inspection Society members rushed forward, but were instantly engulfed by the electrical grid. However, one of them erected a transparent barrier, blocking the electrical grid from a distance. A level 2 mutant. I furrowed my brows. Stepping into the Inspection Society headquarters, I had finally encountered some truly tough opponents. In this current world, level 2 mutants were considered top-tier strategic assets. Previously, I thought a local organization like the Inspection Society having even one level 2 mutant was beyond imagination. But seeing 5 level 2 mutants appear at the same time, I immediately understood. The Genesis organization was clearly pulling the strings behind the scenes. Excellent. Truly excellent. I just arrived in Wakayama Prefecture and was planning to look for you. I didn't expect you to come knocking on my door. Following that strangely magnetic voice, my gaze was drawn to the second floor of the building, where a man stood perfectly straight on the railing. The round railing was only as thick as a child's arm, yet he stood as firmly as if he were on flat ground. The man was nearly 1.9 meters tall, carrying a heavy weapon on his back. It was unclear if it was a sword or a saber. Only the long hilt was visible. The moment she saw him, Yi Yuekong's face turned pale, and her breathing grew noticeably heavier. She clearly knew this man and was extremely wary of him. I asked softly, Yi Yuekong, who is this? What surprised me was that this suddenly appearing man had just spoken in perfect, standard Chinese. Yi Yuekong replied in a low voice, he's called Yu Yejin. He's the person in charge of the Island Nation region for Genesis. I froze for a moment. Yu Yejin? Is he from the Island Nation? Usually, it's very hard for people from the Island Nation to hide their accent when speaking Chinese, but his pronunciation was nearly flawless. Yi Yuekong continued, Yu Yejin is also the name of one of the 3 noble divine children in Island Nation mythology, Tsukuyami. Taking this name is truly too arrogant. I knew full well that Genesis was an organization that styled themselves as gods. They thirsted for the evolution of life, to transcend from mortals into deities, and even achieve immortality. That's right. He is one of the 11 council members of Genesis, and not just an ordinary one. He has completed the first stage of life evolution, Yi Yuekong said, her voice grave. My heart skipped a beat. The first stage of life evolution? She continued. He joined Genesis when the organization was first founded. After completing the first stage of evolution, he can live for 200 to 300 years. He's at least over 80 years old, but he looks like he's only in his 30s. In Genesis, there are only 4 people like him, including my father, the one who was murdered. A lifespan of 200 to 300 years? I couldn't help but take a deep breath. That number was terrifying. He was no different from a vampire in the movies. Are you introducing my history? No need to rush. You can take your time. Yu Yejin leaped straight down from the railing, wearing a military trench coat. Looking closely, I realized his military uniform was a style from half a century ago, as if he had truly stepped out of the distant past. His appearance was frozen in that moment. Time seemed to have stopped flowing over his body, allowing him to maintain that look until now. I took another deep breath. This was the deadly allure of Genesis. Miss Yuekong, I watched you grow up. You were so beautiful back then, making so many hearts flutter. It's just a pity that your father, Yuuanaki, was too stubborn. We endured for over half a century, waiting for the era prophesied by the ruins to finally arrive. This should have been our best opportunity to become supreme gods. But what did your father do? He wanted to save the world. He wanted to return everything to how it was, into a stagnant pool where humans lived like machines, working, eating, breeding, and then waiting to grow old and die. Miss Yuekong, it's still not too late for you to turn back. As long as you accept my mental implant, I can help you restore your beauty, grant you extraordinary power and eternal youth. Yu Yejin's voice was full of temptation, but Yi Yuekong's eyes were not only cold, they were seething with killing intent. The ones who killed her father weren't just the current council president. Yu Yejin and another person were also accomplices. The three of them had teamed up to murder her father. How could she ever bow her head to her enemy? Mr. Jiang, the sword on his back is a weapon from the ruins. You must be careful. Yi Yuekong's warning made my heart tremble slightly. A weapon from the ruins? It was made of at least battleship-grade metal, maybe even stronger. On Earth, there was probably nothing that could withstand it. Is that so? What a pity. Since you've chosen death, I'll gladly oblige. In that instant, Yu Yejin moved. He leaped high into the air, simultaneously drawing the sword from his back. The sword had an extremely bizarre shape. The blade was heavy, with one side lined with vicious, jagged teeth. I narrowed my eyes, killing intent flashing through them. My hands had already raised the barret, instantly locking onto the target. No matter how strong a person's mental abilities were, even if they could fly like a god, they were never as agile in the air as they were on the ground. Jumping that high to deliver a fatal strike, this move looked flashy but wasn't practical. He was just offering himself up for a counterattack. In the blink of an eye, the armor-piercing bullet in the chamber was fully charged with blue light energy. My finger was ready to pull the trigger. The bullet was ready to leave the barrel. But right at that moment, my brain violently jolted. It felt as if time around me had suddenly frozen. My normally swift movements became as sluggish as a snail's. In contrast, Yu Yejin was like a hunting leopard, lunging at me with terrifying speed. The cold blade sliced through the air. In my line of sight, it was piercing straight toward my chest. I couldn't dodge. Blood splattered everywhere. A wave of agonizing pain hit me, and my eyes were filled with absolute disbelief. A sword right through the body. Why couldn't I move? But the sensation was so real. Was my body being controlled, or had the flow of time been distorted? Could it be that I failed? Brother Jiang, dodge. Just as my consciousness felt my life slipping away, Ran Shiyu's furious scream suddenly echoed in my mind. Like a thunderbolt from a clear sky, it jolted me hard and snapped me awake. The moment I woke up, the splattering blood and the wound from just now vanished instantly. In its place was the cold blade hurtling toward my heart at the speed of a bullet. Life and death hung by a thread. I bit down hard on my tongue, using the pain to force myself awake, while simultaneously throwing myself backward. But the blade was too close. He was thrusting with all his might, while I was transitioning from a standstill. There was absolutely no time to dodge. I can't avoid it. Right at that moment, blinding lightning erupted before my eyes, accompanied by a violent gale strong enough to topple an iron tower. Thanks to the push from the wind, my speed skyrocketed, barely allowing me to evade the lethal strike. Cold sweat drenched my back. That lightning was Jiang Zhuiying's, and the gale came from Xiang Shuahai. The two of them attacked simultaneously, one forcing the enemy back, the other saving me from the scythe of death, letting me escape by the skin of my teeth. I was truly just a hair's breadth away from death. An illusion? I narrowed my eyes at Yu Yejin. This guy didn't just have terrifying speed and combat skills. His most dangerous move was his illusions, plunging his opponents deep into hallucinations, making them completely unaware of what was actually happening. This was literally putting them on the chopping block. This was a battle between top-tier mutants. There were countless types of mutant abilities, making battles between mutants extremely complex. It wasn't like Dragon Ball, where power could be measured by a simple number and the lower number was guaranteed to lose. When both sides were evenly matched, if one side didn't fully understand the other's abilities, Even a momentary lapse in judgment was enough to get them killed. No matter how much raw power they had, they wouldn't be able to use it. Stay alert. I have to stay alert. I couldn't afford another mistake like that. If Ran Xiu hadn't detected the illusion in time and sent a mental warning. If Xiang Shuahai and Jiang Zhuing hadn't immediately stepped in to save me, I'd probably be dead right now. I refuse to let my life be saved by a mere string of lucky coincidences. The women around you are quite something. Yu Yejin casually took off his gloves, which had been charred black by the lightning, wiped his lips, and flashed a wicked smile. But that only bought you a little more time. These women of yours all have powerful abilities. They make me crave them. I'll take good care of them for you. His tone was casual, but my eyes gradually darkened. I absolutely will not let a mistake like that happen again. You're out of tricks, right? My turn. Inside the Assassin's Guild headquarters, Yu Yejian and I stood facing each other, about 20 meters apart. In my hands was the Barrett, the bullet inside already brimming with blue light energy. After absorbing 5 level 2 mutant nuclei, my blue light energy reserves had doubled. The total energy I could summon was now the size of a grapefruit, and my combat power had noticeably increased. This shot was much stronger than the one I used to kill the mutant beast back then. A sniper rifle, huh? I heard Shingue mention you. Your bullets are incredibly fast and have terrifying penetrating power. Yu Yejin smiled faintly. This is the advantage of an information gap. Otherwise, if I fired at a high-level mutant who had their guard down, they would likely be taken out instantly, thinking it was just a normal sniper rifle. Is that so? I replied coldly. But so what if you know? Mutants have a very sharp intuition for danger, but when my bullet reaches its maximum speed, will you even have time to dodge? This bullet is times faster than a standard sniper round. How pitiful. Your life ends here. The organization originally planned to recruit you, but the council president and I both agreed that you're too dangerous and uncontrollable. So it's best to eliminate you early to prevent future troubles. It's a shame you won't get to witness Genesis unifying the world in just 2 years. The post-apocalyptic world destroyed the military and the government, giving us the perfect opportunity. In the near future, humanity will enter an unprecedented era since its inception, and we will be the founders of that era. We will even usher in a new epoch for human civilization. As for you, what a pity. You won't be around to witness it. Yu Yejian's voice echoed from all directions, making it impossible for me to pinpoint his location. Unifying the world in 2 years? I was slightly taken aback, but I didn't doubt Genesis's capabilities. Since the dawn of humanity, there had never been an era of global unification. Genesis's ambition was terrifyingly massive, and with the ruins in their hands, ushering in a new epoch for human civilization wasn't impossible either. The only prerequisite was no opponent strong enough to stand in their way. But I had the starseed in my hands. This was my biggest trump card. I said slowly, "You're wrong. I don't need to be a witness. As for ushering in a new epoch for human civilization, I think I can do a better job than you guys." Hearing this, Yu Yejin was stunned. He clearly didn't expect someone to be even more arrogant than Genesis. Haha, he burst out laughing. That's the funniest joke I've ever heard. Perhaps you don't know, but Genesis has already unified all of North America. Our next target is the Asia-Pacific region. Japan, China, and Southeast Asia will all fall under Genesis's rule, and eventually, the entire globe. As for you, you're just one man. Right at that moment, a terrifying wave of killing intent surged forward. Yu Yejin attacked mid-sentence. He knew that once he was stealthed, I would definitely be on high alert. But the fact that I still dared to talk to him in this situation was, in his eyes, no different from courting death. Yi Yuekong's pupils shrank. She couldn't see Yu Yejian, but a chilling sensation ran down her spine, from her feet to the top of her head, and she wasn't even the target. That alone showed how terrifying this attack was. Jiang Zhuing and Xiang Shuehai also paled. They wanted to intervene, but it was too late. But right at that moment, I suddenly spun to the left, instantly raising the gun in my hands and pulling the trigger without hesitation. The sequence of movements was lightning fast. Before Yi Yuekong could even see clearly, the gunshot rang out. Why did he shoot? She was dumbfounded. Anyone else would think I had panicked under the pressure of death and fired blindly. But despite having just met me, she didn't believe I was that kind of person. Just as that thought crossed her mind, she saw a spray of blood erupt in midair. Then, a figure materialized, half his body drenched in blood. It was none other than Yu Yejin. His left shoulder had been completely blown to pieces. He glared at me in disbelief. How could you hit me? This was no coincidence. I reacted incredibly fast because I had pinpointed his exact location and immediately aimed for his shoulder, leaving him no time to defend. But I wasn't a mental-type mutant, and the mental-type girl had temporarily lost her ability to attack. So how did I see through his illusion? Yu Yejin had no time to think. I was already charging at him like an artillery shell. His pupils shrank, and the ruined sword instantly transformed into a shield in front of him. Boom! A deafening crash echoed as Yu Yejin was knocked back over a dozen steps. Before he could even steady himself, I closed the distance again. With my hands cloaked in blue light energy, I unleashed a frenzied assault, throwing hundreds of punches in just 10 short seconds. One of his arms was already crippled. Even with the ruined shield, his remaining arm was shock numb. His movement slowed. Not good. Just as the thought flashed through his mind, a heavy blow landed on his stomach. In that instant, he felt like he had been hit head-on by a truck, his internal organs churning. Yu Yejin was sent flying, slamming hard into the wall. He had to prop himself up with the ruined sword, his eyes now revealing true fear as he looked at me. Uffed! He spat out a mouthful of blood, but immediately after, his figure vanished again. Right before my eyes, his silhouette turned into a phantom, while a terrifying sword strike slashed down at my waist. Even heavily injured, he still maintained astonishing speed and power. But it was as if I had foreseen it. I immediately leaned sideways to dodge. Bam! The moment I dodged, I raised my gun and fired another shot. Throughout the battle, the sniper rifle had remained slung across my back. The moment Yu Yejin vanished, I finished drawing the gun and fired mid-dodge. Not far from me, Yu Yejin staggered into view, still gripping the ruined sword tightly. But before his slash could even finish, his left leg was hit by my bullet. Boom! I lunged forward, my fist covered in blue light energy magnifying before his eyes. Yu Yejin immediately raised the shield to block, but I suddenly accelerated, bringing my fist crashing down. Bang! The shield trembled violently. His body jolted hard before being forced backward. By now, he had lost an arm and a leg, completely losing his balance. I didn't give him even half a second to breathe, continuing my assault like a hurricane. Yu Yejin's pupils contracted violently. In that moment, he clearly felt the threat of death looming over him. Just a few seconds ago, he was still enjoying the feeling of holding my life and death in his hands. My punches rained down on him like a storm. At first, he barely managed to use the shield to defend, but very quickly, he could only endure the relentless beating. Yi Yuekong's eyes widened, unable to believe the scene unfolding before her. Yu Yejin, the man who had stood at the pinnacle of human strength for over a century, was now being beaten by me like it was a street brawl, using the simplest and most brutal method, fists. He surely never imagined he would end up in this situation. Yu Yejin was sent flying into the wall again, his battered body sliding down to the floor. He was covered in blood, his eyes glazed over, and the hand holding the shield hung limply. The man who once possessed overwhelming power had completely lost his ability to fight. I stopped as well, panting heavily, my face pale. I was covered in blood, both mine and his. My hands were torn and mangled, and the blue light energy wrapping them had dimmed significantly. This battle had taken too much out of me. I walked up to Yu Yejin, looked down at him, and said, "Tell me." But just as I opened my mouth, I saw the last glimmer of light in his eyes fade away. His body instantly lost all signs of life. My expression changed. I quickly grabbed him by the neck, lifted him up, and muttered in a low voice, "He's dead." Yu Yejin had committed suicide. Even if he hadn't, he wouldn't have lived much longer, but this action cut off any chance of interrogation. Maybe he didn't want to fall into my hands. Whatever. I tossed his body aside. Genesis and I were already irreconcilable enemies. I never really expected to pry any crucial information out of him anyway. My eyes landed on the shield lying next to the corpse. I bent down and picked it up. The ruined metal shield felt surprisingly light in my hands, but I had just experienced its durability firsthand. It far surpassed any special alloy I had ever seen, perhaps even tougher than the MCV's armor. I tried swinging it a few times, but the shield didn't react. After a moment of thought, I channeled my blue light energy into it. The moment the energy touched it, I immediately felt a strange sense of harmony, as if the shield had become a part of my body. With just a thought, the shield instantly transformed into a sword, its blade coated in a faint layer of blue light. Swish! I swung the sword at the wall. The entire wall shook as cement and plaster flew everywhere, leaving a massive gash. Good stuff. I couldn't hide my excitement. When wrapped in blue light energy, this ruined sword's destructive power was even more terrifying. I didn't know its original method of use, but Yu Yejian probably never expected, even in death, that I would be able to use it in my own way. Finally, I had a truly suitable weapon, perfect for both offense and defense. I turned and walked toward the MCV, but right then, my vision blurred, and I swayed, almost falling. Before I hit the ground, Xiang Shuahai rushed over and caught me. "Brother Jiang, are you okay?" she asked anxiously. I shook my head. "I'm fine, just a little tired." After that battle, my blue light energy was nearly depleted. Both my mental and physical stamina were severely drained, and an unstoppable wave of exhaustion washed over me. It was an incredibly dangerous fight. If I hadn't secretly transferred a portion of my blue light energy onto the ruined sword earlier, allowing me to pinpoint Yu Yejian's true location and unexpectedly cripple one of his arms, the one lying dead here would probably be me. With the support of the blue light energy, I completely ignored what my eyes saw and focused entirely on the location of the ruined sword. Where the sword was, he was. Even in death, Yu Yejian didn't understand how I managed to spot him, and I had no intention of explaining it. Letting him die in confusion like that was fine by me. "Brother Jiang, let Yusin take a look at you," Ran Shiyu said, her voice still laced with worry. The battle just now had truly unsettled her, because my opponent was simply too strong. Even though she had scanned my body with her mental energy, she still wasn't at ease, because Li Yusin was the real expert in this area. As for Ran Shiyu, she was fine, since Yu Yejian's attacks had never actually landed on her. "It's fine," I waved my hand. I turned to Yi Weikong, intending to ask about the black cube, but saw her standing there with her mouth agape, completely dumbfounded. Do you know who you just killed?" "You actually killed Yu Yejian," her voice trembled. Without waiting for my reply, she continued. "He was one of the first council members of Genesis, one of the 4 strongest when the organization was founded. Now that my father is dead, he was the 3rd strongest in Genesis. And yet he died by your hands, with just 1 shot." In Yi Yuekong's eyes, the battle had initially leaned heavily in Yu Yejian's favor, leaving me with almost no chance. But in the blink of an eye, the tables had turned. Even though I followed up with a relentless close-quarters assault, the outcome of the match, in her view, was decided by that one crucial gunshot. She still found it hard to believe. I shook my head and said slowly, "I didn't fight alone. Shiyu warned me about the illusion, and Zhuiying and Shuahai provided timely support. If it weren't for them, I'd probably be dead." Taking down Yu Yejian might look like it only took 1 shot on the surface, but in reality, it was incredibly perilous. If even one of his strikes had landed, the one dead could have been me. Every time I dodged earlier, I was walking the line between life and death, relying on my strength, my teammates' support, and a bit of luck. It's just that Yu Yejian wasn't as lucky. When he failed to realize he had been marked by me, his defeat became inevitable. This once again proved how crucial it was to hide one's true strength, especially for mutants with high damage but weak defense like him and me. In a battle like this, the one who strikes first is usually the one who survives. There's no such thing as a prolonged stalemate. Because I understood that, even after killing Yu Yejian, I wasn't complacent. Instead, I remained on edge because of those 2 near-death moments. I knew I had to get stronger quickly. The remaining 2 powerhouses of Genesis, especially the council president, were likely far more terrifying. I looked at Yi Weikong and asked, "Do you know the combat styles of the current council president and the other powerhouse?" She shook her head. "I don't. And even if I did, it would probably just be what they intentionally let people see. They've been mutants for over half a century. That's plenty of time to hide and cultivate abilities that only they know about. I nodded. I hadn't expected much anyway. Yi Wekong, you mentioned earlier that the Black Cube was taken by your father's enemy. He's a trusted aide of the council president and also the president of the inspection society, named Xue Sha, right? Yes, he's a council member. No, he isn't. At that moment, Ren Xiu spoke up. Brother Jiang, Xue Sha might have already evacuated the inspection society headquarters. She had covered the entire area with her mental energy, but aside from a few unimportant grunts, all the key figures had vanished. Yi Wekong added, Shen Gui didn't show up either. He probably took Xue Sha and the rest and retreated to the Genesis headquarters in the island nation. The Black Cube was definitely taken with them. My voice turned cold. Shen Gui has attacked me twice. Even without the Black Cube, I wouldn't let him off the hook, let alone now that he has it. Zero immediately understood my intentions. Brother Jiang, are we going after Shen Gui to take back the Black Cube? Yes, we move out immediately. Yi Wekong, you know the way to the Genesis headquarters, right? I asked. Yi Wekong stared blankly at me and the others. When she was bought, she never imagined her buyers would be a group like this. They had just killed Yu Yejian, and now they were immediately going after Shen Gui. I don't know the exact location, but I know the general direction, she nodded. We drove the MCV out of the building and encountered a group of inspection society members standing outside, holding guns but not daring to fire a single shot. The terrifying sounds from the battle just now were still echoing in their heads. The entire building seemed to have shaken. That battle wasn't something they could interfere in. And seeing only this bus come out, the outcome inside was all too clear. Surrounding them was the rubble and corpses from the explosions. That alone was enough to make them realize that even with twice as many guns, they stood no chance. Surrender, and you won't be killed. Your leaders have already fled. If you resist, don't blame us for showing no mercy, Ren Xiu's cold voice echoed in their minds. A few still didn't believe it, but eventually, they were forced to accept reality. After a moment of silence, someone threw their gun to the ground. The rest followed suit one by one. Shen Gui had taken Xue Sha and his trusted aides and left. The remaining members had no loyalty left. With their leaders gone, why would they risk their lives? Will someone come out and show us where your armory is? Otherwise, don't even think about leaving, Jiang Zhuing said with a giggle. Her smile was cute, but her eyes were terrifyingly cold. A young man hesitated before stepping forward, stammering his agreement. In the Inspection Society's warehouse, we found a large amount of high-quality mutant meat. Food and ammunition, including the armor-piercing rounds I was using. There was quite a lot of it. Satisfied, I stored everything into the MCV's storage space. But that wasn't all. I also found 2 level 2 mutant nuclei and 3 level 2 mutant blood nuclei. Xue Sha had retreated in such a hurry that he left these behind. Holding the mutant nucleus in my hand, I could clearly feel the abundant energy inside. Once I absorbed it all, my blue light energy would definitely surge. After the battle with Yu Yejian, I felt the threat from Genesis even more acutely. If he was already that terrifying, then the other two, especially the council president, must be unfathomably strong. The guide standing outside the warehouse didn't dare breathe too loudly. He thought we would take a long time to clear out the supplies, but the MCV quickly drove off. When he peeked inside, the warehouse was almost completely empty, leaving only useless junk. He watched the departing MCV with eyes full of fear. As the vehicle left the inspection society, the surrendered members also hastily dispersed. Reaching the morning market outside, I saw people timidly hiding in corners, watching with awe and fear as the bus drove out of the Inspection Society headquarters. The news of what happened inside had already spread. No one expected that the Inspection Society headquarters would be completely wiped out by a single vehicle and a small group of people. As of today, the Inspection Society was effectively annihilated. I spotted members of Long Tongue in the crowd. They would soon take over the abandoned territory and resources. Whether they could swallow it all was none of my business. My only target now was Shen Gui and the black cube he carried. The Genesis headquarters was located in the island nation, heading toward Heiankyo. The MCV quickly left Wakayama Prefecture and got onto the highway. There were hardly any zombies on this road, only the scattered, massive skeletons of mutant beasts along the shoulders, along with desolate, ruined houses stretching endlessly down the road ahead. There sure are a lot of mutant beasts in the island nation. As Ing drove the MCV past a massive mutant beast skeleton, I spoke up. Even though they were only separated by a sea, the apocalyptic situation in Huaxia and the island nation was starkly different. Brother Jiang, who knows, you might gather enough level 2 mutant nuclei to unlock your third evolution, Li Yusin said, her voice carrying a hint of excitement. Previously, I had collected dozens of mutant nuclei and absorbed them, allowing my body to complete one evolution. Now, level 1 nuclei had no effect on me anymore. Only level 2 mutant nuclei could continue to drive my body's mutation. If I accumulated enough of them, it could very well lead to a major breakthrough. I don't know if it'll unlock, but absorbing more level 2 nuclei definitely won't hurt, I said. I held out my hand, and blue light energy gathered in my palm, now the size of a watermelon. From its initial fist-sized volume, the energy had grown 20 or 30 times larger. Only with enough energy could I maintain my combat methods. This energy was like a treasure trove, constantly bringing me unpredictable surprises. I took out the 2 level 2 mutant nuclei I got from the Inspection Society. Li Yusin understood my intention and followed me into the bedroom along with Ran Xiyu. Jiang Zhuiying smiled mischievously. Make sure you cultivate properly, but don't tire yourself out too much. I shot Zhuiying a glance. Stop talking nonsense. If anything happens, let me know. Anyway, my relationship with Li Yusin and Ran Xiyu was no longer a secret, so there was no need for me to hide it. Once inside, Li Yusin gave my body a thorough checkup to ensure there were no issues. Being so close, I took the opportunity to tease her a bit. All right, be serious. Let's absorb the nuclei first. Xiyu has already prepared the hot water. Nowadays, whenever I absorbed a level 2 mutant nucleus, my body barely excreted any impurities, but I still took the chance to take a comfortable shower. The MCV had a hidden storage space, so water wasn't an issue. We could use as much as we wanted. Got it. I held a mutant nucleus and pressed it against my forehead. I'm guessing Xingue and his group won't be able to outrun us. They might have even left by helicopter. Xiyu, did your mental energy detect anything? I turned and asked. At that moment, having just prepared the bathwater, she had taken off her outer coat and was only wearing a crop top, looking incredibly alluring. Nothing. We just have to keep chasing toward Heiankyo. Yeah, I nodded, quickly entering a state of absorption. I took off my shirt and began fusing with the mutant nucleus. Fine beads of sweat gradually appeared on my skin, while Li Yusin stood beside me, gently wiping my sweat with a warm towel. The next morning, I woke up very early. Looking at the 2 girls still sleeping soundly on either side of me, an indescribable sense of contentment welled up in my heart. Perhaps in this apocalyptic world, I was one of the happiest people alive. One man, one vehicle, roaming everywhere with a few girls, living freely and comfortably. I quietly got out of bed, got dressed, and stepped outside. The MCV was parked by the coast. Jiang Zhuiying was watching anime on her iPad, while Xiang Shuahai was preparing breakfast. Where are we? I tilted my head to look out the window. When the scene caught my eye, I was instantly stunned. Before us seemed to be a seaport, and docked inside was a colossal silver-gray ship, as tall as several buildings and hundreds of meters long. It was so massive it made one dizzy. Looking closer, I could clearly see jet fighters on the top deck. An aircraft carrier? I took a deep breath, feeling completely overwhelmed by suddenly coming face to face with such a steel behemoth. It was a U.S. Ford-class aircraft carrier, considered the most advanced model today. The U.S. used to have a military base in the island nation. This aircraft carrier was originally stationed in the Asia-Pacific region. After the apocalypse broke out, it got stranded in this port, Yi Yuekong explained. I knew that as a defeated nation in World War II, the island nation wasn't allowed to have a regular army. Later, they established the self-defense forces, but fundamentally, they still relied on the U.S. military. The U.S. had maintained troops in the island nation for years to ensure security and order. This had also caused local citizens to protest multiple times, as some U.S. soldiers had caused serious incidents. So this is a U.S. military base? I asked. That's right, Yi Yuekong nodded. I rubbed my chin, unable to help but marvel at the metal monster before me. A mighty aircraft carrier weighing tens of thousands of tons, the symbol of a modern military. One of the most advanced, expensive, and imposing weapons, costing over $13 billion US. But I also knew very well that no matter how modern and expensive it was, in this apocalyptic world, an aircraft carrier had lost its ability to operate. A fully functional aircraft carrier required thousands of soldiers to run. Operating this massive war machine was already extremely complex, not to mention the costly and tedious maintenance. Now, over a year since the apocalypse began, an aircraft carrier lacking manpower and regular maintenance had definitely lost all its combat capabilities. I asked, "Are there still people at the U.S. military base right now?" Yi Wekong nodded. "Yes. They've set up a settlement nearby with farmland. There are still a few hundred to over 1,000 U.S. soldiers living here, and they're a very powerful faction." I nodded. The remnants of the military still had ammunition, so their combat power naturally wasn't weak. But against Genesis, a conventional army wouldn't be of much use. First, their equipment wasn't properly maintained. Second, high-level mutants could easily crush ordinary people, especially mental-type mutants. With just a thought, they could manipulate people or even make normal humans slaughter each other. Under those circumstances, a war simply couldn't be waged. "Then why are we stopping here?" I asked. Yi Wekong explained. "I heard Zhuing say you need level 2 mutant nuclei. The military can't deal with mutant council members, but they're very good at hunting mutant beasts with heavy weapons. They've definitely hoarded quite a few nuclei. You can buy them from them." I was immediately intrigued. This was indeed a great idea. By the time the MCV entered the U.S. military base, it was already late afternoon. After a day of adjustment, I had completely absorbed the energy from the 2 level 2 mutant nuclei, and my body was at its peak condition. The vehicle drove into the settlement, but the place didn't have a heavy military atmosphere. Instead, it felt like a depraved night city. Thanks to the presence of the U.S. military, many locals from the island nation had gathered here to live. There were no high-rises, only low-rise commercial areas and shops that had been converted into bars and casinos. Pink neon lights hung everywhere, and provocatively dressed women stood at the doors soliciting customers. It was clearly a red-light district. What surprised me wasn't that, but the fact that this place still had electricity, and plenty of it. Could the electricity be coming from the aircraft carrier? I was a bit surprised, but then I immediately understood. Nuclear-powered aircraft carriers like the Nimitz or Ford were essentially mobile nuclear power plants that could operate for decades. Their output was enough to power a small city. There were precedents in U.S. history of using aircraft carriers to supply power during natural disasters. So it wasn't strange that the U.S. soldiers were using the ship's power generation system to sustain this settlement. These U.S. soldiers sure know how to enjoy themselves. I looked at the casinos and bars, where soldiers were constantly walking in and out, holding liquor and women, seemingly having forgotten the death and starvation of the outside world. Ran Shiyu spoke up. Americans are used to enjoying life. Having studied in the U.S., she understood the culture well. Since her school days, parties, festivals, and sports had been an indispensable part of life. It was completely different from the people of Huaxia, who always accumulated, saved, and planned for the future. In the apocalypse, this difference became even more apparent. The people of Huaxia constantly strove to increase their strength, while many Americans would immediately spend whatever resources they earned on enjoyment. I saw a large black man with his arm around a woman, stuffing a wad of food stamps into her cleavage, laughing wildly. He clearly wasn't rich, just spending recklessly, much like many American sports stars who squandered their wealth and ended up destitute. When I saw a large store displaying all sorts of loot and weapons, with the U.S. military emblem hanging above it, I told Ing to stop the vehicle. This store was directly run by the U.S. military, and it was exactly the target I was looking for. As soon as I stepped out of the vehicle, before I could even enter the store, I heard a whistle from behind. I turned around and saw a guy nearly 1.9 meters tall, with bulging muscles and a mohawk, carrying a gun on his shoulder. But he wasn't whistling at me, he was whistling at Zero. Zero usually wore black leather and had a petite but extremely alluring figure. She perfectly matched the tastes of a certain group of Americans who liked anime-style women, which was why the guy whistled. Zero's expression instantly turned ice cold. She had almost drawn her combat knife. Hold on, Zero. Ignore him. We're here to buy things. If he tries anything, we'll just kill him. Americans have two extremes. The elite class is usually smart and moral, but there's also a group that's incredibly ignorant, Ranxiu said, her voice very calm. Her time living in the U.S. had made her see this clearly. Zero didn't say anything more, just nodded. I stroked my chin, understanding perfectly well. Without strength, bringing a group of girls into a place like this was truly very dangerous. But now, I wasn't afraid of trouble anymore. If anyone dared to start something, I wouldn't hesitate to strike. Stepping into the store, I was immediately overwhelmed by the sheer number of guns before me. This place was no different from an armory. There were all kinds of rifles, machine guns, grenades, and even rocket launchers and explosives. There were also samurai swords from the island nation, forged by the U.S. military, along with all sorts of special forces gear. There were mutant nuclei too, but I couldn't find the level 2 nuclei I needed. They were all level 1, which I was no longer interested in. What's this? Just as I thought I'd be leaving empty-handed, I subconsciously turned to the large shelf in the back, and suddenly froze when I saw a massive object. It was a gun with a metal body, extremely large in size, and looked incredibly sturdy. Actually, calling it a gun wasn't quite accurate anymore. With a massive 20mm caliber, this thing should rightly be called a cannon. An M61 Vulcan Gatling gun. This type of weapon was usually mounted on fighter jets. Weighing 120 kilograms, it was completely impossible to use for individual combat. Its insane firing rate of 6,000 rounds per minute created a terrifying recoil that only aircraft or tanks could withstand. Every single bullet from this gun was far more powerful than the Barrett I was using. A monstrous weapon like this shouldn't have appeared in a normal gun shop, but the apocalypse had changed all the rules. This M61 Vulcan had clearly been salvaged from a fighter jet and placed here for powerful factions to buy. For a mutant, wielding a metal monster like this might not be impossible. I couldn't help but feel tempted looking at this Gatling gun, especially when there were massive ammo boxes right next to it. Not just 20mm rounds for the Gatling, but also 12.7mm rounds for the Barrett sniper rifle. Are those tungsten alloy armor-piercing rounds? My eyes lit up when I saw a special ammo box. Until now, I had only used steel core armor-piercing rounds provided by Long Tongue, which were the common standard. But tungsten core rounds were much higher end and extremely rare, because tungsten was an expensive metal. Tungsten's density is twice that of steel, meaning that for the same caliber, the warhead would be twice as heavy, and its armor-piercing capability would be worlds apart. What shocked me the most was that right next to the tungsten rounds, there were also 20mm armor-piercing rounds specifically for the Gatling gun. When Ranxiu translated a rare word printed on the ammo box for me, I frowned, subconsciously reaching up to stroke my chin. That word was uranium. Depleted uranium armor-piercing rounds. I was truly startled. I had only ever heard of this type of ammunition through military magazines and the internet. I had never seen it with my own eyes. Uranium is a material used in nuclear weapons. It has an even higher density than tungsten, making its armor-piercing capabilities even more terrifying. In Huaxia, due to abundant tungsten resources and concerns about radioactive contamination, depleted uranium rounds weren't widely used. But the U.S. was the opposite. Lacking tungsten but having plenty of uranium, they became the world's largest producer of depleted uranium ammunition. The power of these rounds far exceeded standard tungsten rounds. Looking at the massive 20mm bullets before me, I picked one up and realized its length actually exceeded the distance from my fingertips to my wrist. My mind started calculating. If I combined the power of my blue light energy with this 20mm Gatling gun, just how terrifying would the destructive force be? This Gatling machine gun and all this ammo, I want to buy it. How much? I turned and asked the saleswoman. I had already done my research on what held trade value in this settlement. Besides evolutionary nuclei, there was whiskey, beer, cigars, and marijuana. I didn't have the latter, but I had plenty of evolutionary nuclei. Over the past few months, I had traveled everywhere and collected quite a lot, to the point where the storage on the MCV was almost full. Not to mention, the lab on the MCV could produce gene serums and evolutionary nuclei. Only I could use the gene serums, but there were no restrictions on the evolutionary nuclei, and their quality was even higher than standard ones. I had previously obtained a large amount of level 1 mutant nuclei from Shanghai. After using a portion, the rest were sent to the lab for conversion. However, the moment I asked for the price, the attractive saleswoman suddenly turned cold. She said, "There are M16S, M4 carbines, and Barretts on the front shelves. Aren't those enough for you?" My English wasn't bad, but hearing those weapon names was still a bit hard to follow. Luckily, Ran Shiyu immediately translated. I frowned slightly and asked, "You display weapons here, but don't sell them?" The saleswoman replied, "This settlement is near the sea. Mutant beasts occasionally come ashore, and our soldiers need these heavy weapons to deal with them. Even if I sold it to you, you wouldn't be able to use it. An M16 is enough. Don't tell me you plan to use a Gatling gun to shoot zombies. What we buy it for is none of your business. If you're not selling it, why put it on display? You're not even the person in charge here. Do you have the right to decide?" Hearing Shiyu's translation, Zhang Zhuing immediately fired back angrily. In her eyes, this saleswoman was just being a busybody. "Oh my God, isn't this Ran Shiyu?" Right at that moment, a joyful voice rang out from behind, causing Zhu Ying, who was about to continue, to stop and turn around in surprise. Shiyu actually had an acquaintance here? A young man in a U.S. military uniform, in his early 20s, was looking at Shiyu with delight. "Ran Shiyu, why are you here?" Shiyu froze for a moment, a flash of surprise in her eyes. "It's you?" "Yeah, I enlisted after graduation. I didn't expect the apocalypse to break out after only serving for half a year. But you should be in Huaxia. Why are you in the island nation? Anyway, it's so great to see you again like this." The young man rattled off in one breath. "It's a long story. We just came here from Huaxia," Shiyu replied. He was stunned, then continued asking about Shiyu's situation, clearly doubting that she had crossed the ocean under the current circumstances. Shiyu just smiled and didn't explain further. "This is my captain, Jiang Lushi, and these are my companions." Shiyu introduced everyone one by one. Then she said, "This is my old college classmate from the US, OS. Nice to meet you all." OS observed Shiyu's attitude toward me and the team, realizing we were very close, and greeted us with both surprise and enthusiasm. Back in college, Shiyu had always been cold and aloof, yet now she was acting so friendly with us. When I came in just now, it seemed like there was a bit of an argument. OS suddenly asked. He had actually heard the arguing and stepped in, not expecting to run into Shiyu. The saleswoman looked quite flustered seeing that we knew an officer. "Sir, we wanted to buy something, but she refused to sell it, so we had a little debate." Zhuing quickly spoke up first. "What did you want to buy?" OS asked curiously. "Sir, they want to buy the Gatling machine gun," the saleswoman said, pointing at me. OS looked at me in surprise, seemingly doubting that I could use such a weapon, but that was none of his business anyway. Since it's on display and a customer wants to buy it, of course we should sell it. OS turned and said to the saleswoman, "Thank you. I had a pretty good impression of OS. Don't mention it. You're Ran Shiyu's teammates, which makes you my friends too." OS smiled, then turned to Shiyu. "Tomorrow we're having a big celebration party. I'd like to invite you and your friends to join us. What do you say?" Shiyu didn't answer immediately, but turned to look at me. I smiled. In the apocalypse, running into an old acquaintance wasn't easy. "If you want to go, then go." I knew she seemed cold on the outside, but found it hard to refuse an invitation from an old friend. Shiyu thought for a moment, then nodded. "All right then." Then, using mental telepathy, she told me that we might be able to find someone selling mutant nuclei at the party. We strolled all over the market but couldn't find a level 2 crystal core. They really are incredibly rare. I nodded, praising her for being so thoughtful. Shiyu smiled faintly, turning to Abbott. "When the party starts, just contact us. We're staying in an RV base. It's very easy to spot." Abbott looked at Shiyu, then glanced at me, unable to hide his surprise. He had studied with Shiyu for 4 years and knew well that despite her politeness, she was cold and arrogant, never letting any guy get close. Yet now, she looked as if she were nestling right by my side. What surprised him even more was when Shiyu stayed silent. He could feel an unusual energy radiating from her. Perhaps she had changed a lot since the apocalypse began. After we left, Abbott suddenly remembered Shiyu's words. RV base. Using an RV in the apocalypse, they sure know how to enjoy life, but it's full of risks. He figured he'd remind her the next time they met. The Gatling machine gun really left me satisfied. I couldn't wait to test its firepower. After buying the Gatling, I lost interest in browsing the market and headed straight back to the RV bus parked outside. It stood out so much that everyone passing by turned to look. Even though they could only see the exterior and had no idea it was a luxurious little home inside. The next afternoon, a knock came from outside. But honestly, there was no need to knock. Shiyu already knew Abbott had arrived. The door opened right after a single knock. Seeing Shiyu and the others standing right there, Abbott couldn't help but marvel at his old classmate's extraordinary sharpness. The celebration party is about to start. Oh my God. Abbott only got halfway through his sentence before his eyes were glued to the bus's interior, blurting out in shock. Earlier, he had just assumed an RV would be somewhat comfortable. He never expected it to be this luxurious. Looking at the bus, Abbott immediately wanted to take a seat, completely forgetting the warnings he had planned to give. Even knowing the hidden dangers of using an RV, it was clearly far more comfortable than those armored off-road vehicles, which were usually covered in blood and dents. Those things had absolutely nothing to do with the word pleasant. For a normal person before the apocalypse, just stepping into one of those vehicles would be enough to make them nauseous. Abbott, Shiyu's call snapped him back to reality. This is amazing. I'm completely blown away. Abbott laughed loudly, then continued. Let's go. Are you guys taking this bus? I think the party venue is pretty cramped. I'm afraid there won't be enough space. Don't worry about it, I replied. Even though I didn't know where the party was being held in the military base, I had no intention of leaving the vehicle behind. My main goal was still to find someone selling mutant crystal cores, but I also wanted everyone to relax a bit. Since the apocalypse began, we hadn't participated in any real recreational activities. Zhuing occasionally watched anime and movies, but Uxian and the others spent almost all their time training their abilities. Even so, our so-called relaxation was very simple, just eating, drinking, and taking a little stroll. So many people, Zhuing exclaimed in surprise. From a distance, I could see a ton of vehicles converging on a large building. The parking lot out front seemed completely full. It wasn't completely dark yet, but the building was already brightly lit. Neon lights flashed, and the surrounding streetlights were turned on. Even though everyone knew the electricity was supplied by the aircraft carrier, this scene still felt unbelievably extravagant. Of course it's crowded. Abbott excitedly explained in broken Chinese. Major General Jonathan just killed a level 2 mutant beast on the coast. The whole base is throwing a victory party for him. With that kind of strength and reputation, it's very likely he'll become a 4-star or even a 5-star general of the base. I knew that a 5-star general in the U.S. military was equivalent to a marshal, a rank that normally only existed during wartime. But this was the apocalypse. It wasn't strange for the base to appoint one themselves. If he really reached that level, Jonathan would hold absolute power here. Killing a level 2 mutant beast was indeed no small feat, but compared to people like the council members of the Dawn organization, it still wasn't worth my attention. I just gave a slight nod. To Zhu Ying and the others, I was still the strongest. How formidable anyone else was didn't matter. Abbott was about to brag more about the base's power, but seeing our rather lukewarm reaction, he felt a bit awkward. Shiyu, I'll give you a surprise later. Abbott suddenly said mysteriously. Just as Shiyu glanced at him, deafening honks erupted from both in front of and behind our vehicle. The bus was too big, blocking the cars behind us. Quite a few people started cursing. I told you, it's really crowded here. You guys should park, Abbott said. No need. There's still space in the lot. Keep driving, I interrupted. If we hadn't been honked at so obnoxiously by dozens of cars, I might have had the bus pull into the empty lot on the side. But not anymore. Before Abbott could react, he saw the massive bus accelerate, skillfully weaving through the smaller cars. Several times he thought they were going to crash, but the bus always slipped through the narrowest gaps with perfect stability. At one point, the wheels even drove over the drainage ditch, yet the speed didn't drop at all. Screams rang out from the surrounding cars as people frantically slammed on their brakes or swerved aside. They didn't want to yield, but they didn't dare play chicken with a bus that clearly wasn't afraid of a collision. Finally, the bus parked neatly in the lot. Stepping off the bus, Abbott was still in a daze, especially when he saw that the driver was a beautiful girl with a smoking hot body. He had assumed someone with those skills had to be some kind of F1 driver with an awakened ability. He never expected her to be so young. When Zhuing opened the door and stepped down, it wasn't just Abbott. Many American soldiers around also saw her. America had the strongest car culture in the world, and the youth especially loved vehicles. That girl is badass. She might be a pro racer. Racers usually drive small cars. Driving a bus like that takes a completely different set of skills. Lively chatter erupted all around. As I led the 6 girls and Abbott into the hall, quite a few jealous and resentful glares locked onto us. What the hell? He's living with a whole harem of beauties in a luxury bus? This is the apocalypse. Everyone is risking their lives to survive, and he's acting like he's on vacation. Before even walking through the door, I had already become the center of attention. At this base, the American soldiers were mostly male. There were very few women, and the majority of them were Japanese. After the apocalypse, many Japanese women came here seeking protection. The lucky ones found long-term backing, while others were forced to sell their bodies to survive. Even so, there still weren't enough women to go around. Abbott handed his papers to the guards and led me inside, laughing. "Mr. Jiang, you really stand out too much. Walking next to you, even I feel the heat of their jealousy." I considered him an easygoing guy, so I asked directly, "Abbott, I'm looking to buy level 2 mutant crystal cores. Do you know anyone selling them?" Abbott paused. "Level 2 crystal cores? Are you buying them to refine evolution crystals? They're worth more than level 1s, but a lot of people think using them for refinement is a waste, so they keep them as souvenirs. Like a medal of honor. Killing a level 2 mutant beast is proof of a team's strength, and the crystal core is the clearest evidence. But with current refinement technology, one level 2 core is only equivalent to 3 level 1 cores. The energy loss is massive. In larger countries with better tech, it's less of a waste. But in a small base like this, it's practically unfeasible. Keeping them as souvenirs, huh? I sighed, feeling it was nothing but a waste. To me, a single level 2 crystal core was worth far more than dozens of level 1 cores. Just then, the roar of an engine echoed. A massive red and blue semi-truck slowly approached the front of the hall. All vehicles and pedestrians had to get out of its way. The truck was as imposing as Optimus Prime, over 2.5 meters tall and more than 10 meters long. In the back, it carried a giant crab with claws as massive as spears, strong enough to snap an iron bridge in half. Clearly, this was the level 2 mutant beast that Jonathan had killed. Seeing such a majestic truck loaded with seafood, I couldn't help but find it a little funny. The truck door opened, and a man nearly 1.9 meters tall stepped out. His uniform was crisp, his facial features sharp, and his eyes as blue as jade. He looked to be in his 30s. Cheers from the Japanese girls erupted everywhere. Even the usually reserved ones couldn't hold back their excitement. Abbott explained with admiration, "Jonathan is the strongest person in this base. He's about to become the supreme commander. In the upcoming election, he's guaranteed to be a 5-star marshal. With looks, power, and strength like that, Jonathan was indeed the ideal man." Every woman yearned to be by his side. I just nodded, not particularly caring. Compared to the enemies I had faced, he was still far behind. Jonathan walked into the hall amidst wild, fanatic cheering. He was always the center of attention, not just because of his status, but also because of his generosity. He waved his hand, calling the chef over and ordering, "Take this crab to the kitchen. Grill it. Make crab cakes and burgers. My girlfriend likes sashimi. Make sure to prepare some from the claws." That generosity was exactly why he had such massive influence in the base. Even in the apocalypse, when everything was scarce, people still craved parties and joy. I stood there observing the bustling scene before me, with only one goal in mind: finding a way to approach Jonathan and buy the level 2 mutant crystal core. But he was surrounded by too many people right now. I knew I had to be patient. Abbott had already left to greet some acquaintances, while I stayed back and waited. After a while, I decided to walk over to the banquet table and grab a glass of wine, figuring it would pave the way to greet Jonathan. But just as I reached out, a Japanese waiter stepped up and stopped me. "Excuse me, sir. You cannot take this liquor." He spoke in English, his tone polite but icy. I asked, a bit surprised, why. "The whiskey is limited. We only open 20 bottles per party." He spoke very formally, but there was absolutely no goodwill in his eyes. I furrowed my brows slightly. I suppose he wasn't wrong. I wasn't white. Nor was I a military officer. If just anyone could drink the whiskey, it would have run out ages ago. Even though I was annoyed, I didn't give him a hard time. Right then, the waiter smiled and turned to the girls with me. "Ladies, if you need a drink to celebrate, you are welcome to take some." It was glaringly obvious. He knew I wanted to use the drink to introduce myself to Jonathan. But in his eyes, how could a nobody like me ever catch the eye of the highest-ranking person in the base? Women, however, were a different story. Jonathan always had time for beautiful women. Hearing that, my expression instantly turned cold. Everyone saw that I came with them. He refused to let me take a drink, yet turned around and suggested the girls toast in my place. Even if he didn't say it out loud, it was clear that in his eyes, I wasn't worth a damn. He believed that in the apocalypse, beautiful women would naturally gravitate toward a strong man like Jonathan. Whether in looks, power, or status, in his eyes, I couldn't even compare. Humph, such cheap liquor. I wouldn't drink it even if you gave it to me. What a joke. Zhu said coldly. She almost grabbed the bottle and smashed it over the waiter's head, but she held back, remembering the purpose of our trip. Uxian stood nearby, looking displeased, clearly getting ready to snap back at him. But before she could open her mouth, Shuai stepped up from behind, wrapping her arms around my waist and pressing her soft body against my back. "Mr. Jiang, we'll be with you after the party, okay? You can pick whoever you want, but you have to take me with you." She spoke in English, her voice sweet and seductive, deliberately blowing softly into my ear, sending a shiver down my spine. I rubbed my nose slightly, completely caught off guard by her actions. My relationship with Uxian was already practically public. Shuai was smart. She understood her own feelings, and she understood my choice. Lately, she had been intentionally keeping her distance, making me gradually get used to her silence. This time, even if it was just an act, who knew how much of it was real? Maybe she just couldn't stand the waiter's disdainful look, so she used this chance to stand up for me. Uxian, standing behind, paused for a moment. At first, she was a little unhappy, but seeing Shuai protect me like that, she understood. If it were her, she probably wouldn't have felt any better about it. The jealousy in her heart slowly faded away. After all, this was the apocalypse. Order and morality had collapsed. What was there left to bicker about? Shuai smiled awkwardly at Uxian, letting go of me but still linking her arm through mine, while Uxian naturally took my other arm. Seeing this, the Japanese waiter's face instantly turned ugly. In his eyes, this was a blatant provocation. Were all these beautiful girls really mine? Why were they all revolving around a man like me? Even if I wasn't bad-looking, to the waiter, I still couldn't compare to Jonathan. "Since you are not taking any drinks, please do not stand here and block the other guests." His tone was still polite, but as cold as ice. Hilarious. Liquor this cheap, I'd feel dirty even using it as mouthwash. Zhu sneered. Her words instantly rubbed a few people nearby the wrong way. A Japanese man wearing a kimono and carrying a samurai sword said coldly, "Feel dirty using it as mouthwash. Do you know that in this base, a single bottle of whiskey can be traded for a woman?" That comment made Zhu so furious she almost attacked him. Luckily, Uxian managed to pull her back in time. I ignored them, picked up a cup of tea, and walked straight toward Jonathan. He was still surrounded by a crowd, but I was out of patience. I walked slowly and steadily. The crowd seemed to be pushed aside by an invisible force, allowing me to stand directly in front of him. "Major General Jonathan, could you spare me a few minutes?" I spoke in English. Jonathan shot me a glance. He had already noticed me trying to approach him, but he had absolutely no interest in some nameless Asian guy. He just gave a faint smile and said, "Tea is something the Japanese, the Chinese, and the British like. To me, it has no flavor at all." Jonathan spoke up, his attitude far from friendly. In truth, he had noticed me earlier. A man walking in with a whole group of beauties was hard to miss. What truly surprised Jonathan were the women beside me. In his military zone, after a year of the apocalypse, no matter how beautiful a woman was, under the pressure of survival, mental breakdowns, and material shortages, they would inevitably look haggard. That couldn't be hidden with makeup. But the women next to me weren't like that. They were full of life, youthful, seductive, radiating a very real kind of beauty. But with Jonathan's status, if women didn't come to him on their own, he wouldn't go out of his way to approach them. Besides, the election was only 20 days away. Everything had to wait until he became a five-star marshal. Sensing his coldness, my tone dropped any pretense of politeness. I don't care if you like tea or not. I'm here to do business with you. I want to buy the level 2 mutant crystal core. Jonathan chuckled softly. In his eyes, I was just some guy trying to profit off him. And with an attitude like this, how could he possibly be interested? If you're not interested, I guess we have nothing more to talk about. He replied. He lacked nothing and had absolutely no need to do business with anyone. If he lacked anything, it was probably just the girl standing next to me. But he could also sense the fluctuations of abilities coming from them. They weren't weaklings. Treating them like commodities to be seized just wasn't realistic. Fine then, I replied curtly. Right then, an English voice rang out from behind me. If you have nothing left to say, please step aside. I turned to look. The one speaking was the Japanese samurai from earlier who had lined up for drinks and argued with Zhu Ying. He had gotten his drink at the same time as me, so naturally, he came up to offer a toast at the same time. The samurai shot me a contemptuous glare and stepped forward, holding his glass of whiskey. Ah, Mr. Yamada. This time, Jonathan smiled, a stark contrast to his previous attitude. Even though he preferred chatting with women, Yamada was one of the strongest awakened among the Japanese faction that had joined the base. Furthermore, he needed the Japanese faction's votes. If you really want to get acquainted with Major General Jonathan, I can introduce you. After finishing his toast, Yamada turned to me, smiling triumphantly. In his eyes, I was nothing more than a clown trying to show off, only to be completely ignored. I just gave a faint smile, ignoring him, and stepped back into a corner. I watched Jonathan amidst the crowd, gently swirling the tea in my cup. Even though I had temporarily stepped back, I had no intention of leaving. Now that I was at this military base, I absolutely wasn't going to miss out on that level 2 mutant crystal core. In the apocalypse, there weren't many rules left. Strength was everything. Facing the threat of Dawn, an organization that wanted to swallow the whole world, I couldn't pass up a chance to strengthen myself over some hollow morals. Ladies and gentlemen, I am thrilled that you could all join me in celebration today. Jonathan began his speech. Years ago, the pioneers of America sailed across the ocean on the Mayflower, arriving in a strange and desolate land. They endured the cold, starvation, and disease. Many of them died. Thanks to the help of the kind-hearted Native Americans, they reaped a bountiful harvest and celebrated together. That was Thanksgiving. We must thank God for granting us food, which led to the mighty America of today. But after the apocalypse, the land has returned to ruin. Right now, we are no different from those pioneers of the past. We crossed the ocean to East Asia, and together with the good people here, we will rebuild this land. Today, we celebrate the spoils of our hunt and host this grand holiday. I propose we make today our new Thanksgiving. In the future, people will tell the story of today, and we will be the founding fathers of a new nation. The rousing speech sent cheers surging like a tidal wave. I saw quite a few Japanese girls shedding tears, endlessly chanting Jonathan's name. I had to admit, the man was an outstanding orator. In times of despair, people were easily moved by words like that. It was no wonder he was worshipped so fiercely. But in my eyes, it was all just vanity. Flowers in a mirror, the moon in the water. In the face of dawn, this so-called new nation meant absolutely nothing. The chefs have finished preparing the food. Enjoy the feast, Jonathan said, gesturing. The large doors at the back of the hall opened, revealing a spacious lawn behind it. In the center of the lawn, a bonfire blazed, and tables were loaded with food. Around the campfire, 7 or 8 Japanese girls in bikinis were dancing, making no effort to hide their alluring bodies. As they danced wildly around the flames, their beauty surged like ocean waves, making it hard to look away. A bonfire party naturally couldn't lack such lively entertainment. The Americans, who loved to show off, took to the stage one by one. A fire type awakened spewed flames, the pillar of fire rising even higher than the bonfire in the center of the square. Right after, an American soldier dual-wielding pistols put on a rapid-fire display. His movements were a dizzying blur, hitting dead center on targets to his left and right without wasting a single bullet. Next, a Japanese samurai stepped up to perform swordsmanship. Coincidentally, it was Yamada, the guy who had lined up for drinks with me and toasted Jonathan. He drew his samurai sword, executing a quick draw technique along with the traceless star snow sword style. As he unleashed his moves, the entire square seemed to fill with flashing blade light, like snow falling from the sky. You could only see the gleam, not the sword itself. One of his lackeys continuously threw rocks at Yamada. The stones flew fast and thick, but every single one was sliced in half midair. Some were even diced into multiple pieces with unbelievably smooth cuts. Many American soldiers jumped to their feet, clapping and cheering. They were used to guns, so they were all the more curious and fascinated by this ancient, mystical swordsmanship from the East. "Isn't this just like Fruit Ninja?" Zhu burst out laughing. She had already been pissed off by Yamada's comment about trading 2 bottles of whiskey for a woman, so how could she hold back now? Her words instantly drew the attention of everyone around. Fruit Ninja had been hugely popular before the apocalypse. Hearing her say that, everyone realized it really did look exactly like it, suddenly making Yamada's performance seem a bit ridiculous. Quite a few American soldiers chuckled. Yamada sheathed his sword and scowled at Zhu. "You must be tired of throwing rocks, right? Let me take over for you," Zhu said to the lackey throwing the stones. Yamada laughed. He knew this girl was deliberately provoking him, but he was completely confident in his swordsmanship. He also noticed that Zhu wasn't a strength type awakened. The rocks she threw might even be slower than his lackeys. "Are you an awakened? Planning to attack me by throwing rocks? Huh, are you scared? Don't worry, I'm afraid of getting my hands dirty, so I won't fight you," Zhu sneered. "Being arrogant in the apocalypse will get you killed." Yamada replied coldly. "You're right. Being arrogant will get you killed," Zhu nodded. Then, instead of picking up a rock, she casually grabbed a fruit platter and snapped off a banana. "Are you kidding me?" Yamada's eyes widened. He wasn't even afraid of rocks, let alone a banana. This was nothing short of an insult to his swordsmanship. "Isn't this Fruit Ninja? I'll throw the banana. If you can slice it, I'll admit you're good." Zhu laughed, twirling the banana in her hand. "Ready? 3. She deliberately counted down before throwing it. The banana spun through the air, flying slowly. It felt as light as if it had been shot from a slingshot. Yamada's face instantly darkened. She was clearly mocking him. Mocking whistles from the American soldiers echoed around them. "You think you're playing a joke on someone, but you're just making a fool of yourself," Yamada shouted, bringing his sword down in a slash. Even if it was just a banana, he was going to slice it to pieces. Right at that moment, Zhu blinked, signaling me. I immediately understood my little sister's intention. I had guessed it the moment I saw her grab the banana. I just shook my head with a faint smile, but I still couldn't let her lose face. My finger twitched slightly. A phantom-like surge of blue energy quietly slipped into the banana. At that exact moment, Yamada's sword chopped down like a lightning bolt. The blade flashed past, but the banana suddenly spun in a bizarre way, causing the fatal slash to miss by a hair's breadth. The banana kept spinning, slowly flying right back toward Yamada. Missing his strike, Yamada was horrified and tried to dodge, but the banana's trajectory looked slow, yet was incredibly unpredictable. In the blink of an eye, it was right in front of his face. Smack! A crisp sound rang out as the banana slammed squarely into Yamada's face. He was still holding his slashing pose, but his entire body seemed to turn to stone, standing frozen next to the bonfire. The banana slowly slid down to the ground, while Yamada just stood there, as stiff as a statue. In an instant, the lively atmosphere of the bonfire party died down. Everyone stared wide-eyed at Yamada, unable to believe what had just happened. The banana had flown so slowly that not just Yamada, but any American soldier here could have easily sliced it. Yet he had somehow missed his slash and even let the banana smack him right in the face. Earlier, no matter how many rocks flew at him, none could touch him. Yet now, a single banana had humiliated him this badly. It was truly unbelievable. The banana rolled onto the ground. Yamada's face flushed as red as a pig's liver, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword so tightly his knuckles turned white. Your swordsmanship doesn't seem that great, does it? Zhu Ying held the fruit platter, smiling brightly. I can score thousands of points playing Fruit Ninja, but you lost on the very first fruit. You suck. Yamada glared at Zhu Ying, the veins on his forehead throbbing wildly with rage. He was certain she had used some kind of trick, but he couldn't figure out what it was for the life of him. You're good. I was just careless just now. Let's go again. Yamada gritted his teeth, his eyes as sharp as a hawk's, his entire body entering a state of absolute seriousness. He now realized the girl in front of him was far from simple. She was extremely dangerous. Sure. Zhu Ying seemed to have anticipated his reaction. She casually pulled out something bright yellow. A frozen durian. I didn't expect them to have durian here. What a rare treat, she clicked her tongue. After the apocalypse, this luxurious fruit had practically gone extinct. Only places with a stable power supply, like the U.S. military's aircraft carrier, could preserve it. Bananas and durians retained their flavor very well when frozen, which was why they were still around here. Looking at the durian, as big as a basin and covered in sharp spikes, Yamada started to feel uneasy. I'm throwing it. The moment Zhu Ying finished speaking, the durian flew straight at him. Yamada instantly gripped his sword tightly, focusing all his concentration, treating it as if he were facing a level 2 mutant beast. He swung his sword with a do-or-die resolve. Flash! The blade light cleaved the durian in half. Got it! A surge of joy welled up in Yamada's heart. He had finally broken this girl's trick. But 2 seconds later, his expression instantly froze. The two halves of the durian didn't fly apart as expected. Instead, they seemed to stick together, maintaining their trajectory and speed, flying straight at him. A heavy thud rang out as the durian smashed squarely into Yamada's face, making his mind go completely blank. Oh my God! An American girl gasped, covering her mouth. Quite a few American soldiers around them winced. Just watching it hurt. The bisected durian finally broke apart, falling to the ground along with tiny shards of ice. Yamada staggered a few steps before collapsing onto his butt, his face swollen. He wasn't a strength type awakened. His swordsmanship was strong, but getting a durian smashed into his face was still enough to leave him dizzy. It took him a long time to recover. He stood up, clutching his face, his nose bleeding. Filled with humiliation and rage, he wished the ground would swallow him whole. He wanted to charge forward and fight Zhu Ying in hand-to-hand combat to win back his honor. Yamada, stand down. At that moment, Jonathan spoke up. He could see that Zhu Ying was deliberately provoking him, and Yamada was completely outmatched. If he kept going, he'd only humiliate himself further. In an instant, everyone's eyes shifted to Jonathan. Obviously, Zhu Ying and I were outsiders crashing this victory party he called the New Thanksgiving. With outsiders causing such a scene, as the host of the party, Jonathan couldn't just ignore it. You're very skilled, especially for a girl, Jonathan said to Zhu Ying, then looked over at me. He had realized that I was the leader of this group. It seemed he had underestimated us earlier. Brother, care for a drink? Jonathan raised his glass of whiskey. I continued to leisurely swirl the tea in my cup, smiling as I said, Sorry, I have no interest in whiskey. There was nothing more infuriating than having your own words thrown back in your face. Jonathan narrowed his eyes. The atmosphere instantly grew suffocating. These outsiders were too arrogant, to the point of completely disrespecting him. In this space, Jonathan had always been a spiritual symbol. He had never been challenged like this before. So arrogant. I wonder what kind of skills he has to dare speak like that. 3 men and 1 woman stepped up behind Jonathan. All of them were American, staring at us with cold, menacing eyes, their auras full of intimidation. This was Jonathan's personal special ops team. The 4 of them were famous in the military zone, considered the strongest fighters, second only to Jonathan himself. Jonathan was naturally the strongest in the military zone, but he couldn't go out and fight alone. He needed teammates. So Jonathan had chosen these 4 to stand by his side. Among them was a former SEAL team member, someone who had awakened an ability after the apocalypse and evolved rapidly, and the only woman, who was originally the team's combat medic. Her physical strength wasn't great, but after the apocalypse, she had awakened 2 rare abilities. It was safe to say that any one of the four was more than capable of handling extremely dangerous missions. Relying on his prestige and strength, Jonathan had forged these four into a nearly invincible team. They had hunted down quite a few level 2 mutant beasts and achieved countless merits. When the special ops team appeared, the atmosphere instantly boiled over. This was the strongest force in the military zone. They were usually out on the front lines fighting and rarely showed their faces. Their appearance at the bonfire party made countless people ecstatic. Some whistled, others cheered. In everyone's eyes, these five were like idols. Everyone was curious if this group of outsiders actually had what it took to force them to fight for real. Using a lineup like this to deal with a few outsiders was clearly making a mountain out of a molehill. At this moment, Shuai, Zero, and Shiyu had already stepped up behind Zhuing. I remained sitting quietly in the corner, not moving an inch. The five girls stood in a row, facing four towering men and a female medic. The contrast was incredibly stark. You girls are pretty cocky. Well then, dare to fight me? A massive man stepped forward, resting an absurdly large two-handed sword on his shoulder. It was a knight's great sword, broad, thick, with a hilt almost as thick as a child's arm. This alloy sword weighed at least 50 or 60 pounds, yet in his hands, it looked as light as dry grass. Clearly, this was a strength type awakened. Your weapons are daggers? Haha, what a bunch of kids' toys. He glanced at the daggers strapped to Zhu Ying and Zero's thighs, then casually swung his heavy sword a few times. I'll even let you all come at me at once. But a fight needs a prize, right? If you lose, how about you all show me a good time tonight? Before his sleazy laughter even faded, a black shadow lunged forward like a ghost. Zhu Ying made her move. The pitch-black dagger in her hand tore through the wind. Her figure darted through the air so fast she practically vanished. The man instantly swung his greatsword down. Only one thought crossed his mind. His sword was longer and heavier than her dagger. One swing was enough to chop down a tree. But at that exact moment, Zhu Ying's body bent in an impossible angle, as supple as if she had no bones, slipping right past the blade. The dagger in her hand was like a venomous snake, thrusting straight for his throat at terrifying speed. The man sensed the horrifying killing intent and immediately leaped back. Even so, the blade still managed to graze the right side of his neck. Flash! The muscles in his neck were torn open, his carotid artery severed. Blood sprayed over a meter into the air. He trembled, the sword slipping from his grasp and flying straight into the bonfire, sending sparks scattering everywhere. He clutched his neck, screaming in agony, his fierce face twisted in pain. Everyone knew that severing just one side of the carotid artery meant extreme blood loss. He could die at any second. This scene left everyone around them dead silent. With just a short dagger, that girl had dared to face off against a greatsword and even landed a near-fatal blow. All because her speed was so fast no one could even see it clearly. Jonathan's face instantly darkened, a freezing aura radiating from him. His eyes locked onto Zhu Ying like a ferocious tiger. The five of them had lived and died together since the apocalypse began. Their bond was incredibly deep. John, the team's medic, immediately sprang into action. She rushed over, grabbing the falling man with one hand and placing the other on his neck. A faint light flashed, and the bleeding stopped instantly. You crazy bitch. Do you want to die? The female medic looked up, glaring straight at Zhu Ying. A powerful psychic wave shot out from her forehead, aiming straight for Zhu Ying's brain. She was an extremely rare awakened, possessing both psychic and medical abilities. She could heal, but she could also launch terrifying psychic attacks. Quite a few awakened had their minds shattered by her, even turning into complete vegetables. A psychic attack was invisible and hard to defend against. This time, she wanted to avenge John in a single strike. But at that exact moment, the female medic's expression drastically changed. She felt her psychic attack crash straight into a massive psychic wall. If her psychic attack was like a sharp sword, then that wall was no different from the alloy armor of a tank. The moment the sword touched it, it instantly shattered. The medic cried out in terror, stumbling back several steps, her face deathly pale. The backlash caused John's freshly sealed wound to start bleeding again. A psychic type awakened. An unprecedented panic surged in her heart. The medic's trembling eyes looked toward Shiyu. That terrifying psychic force field was coming from her. Earlier, the medic had used her psychic ability to scan the entire enemy group, but hadn't detected the presence of a psychic type awakened at all. This meant only one thing. Shiyu's psychic power was vastly superior to hers. Now, the medic could clearly feel that Shiyu's entire body was enveloped in a dense psychic force field. Just looking into her eyes was enough to make her head throb with pain. As a psychic type awakened, Shiyu rarely met her match. Aside from the council members of the Dawn organization, she had never lost a single psychic confrontation. Seeing their teammates fail one after another, the remaining 2 members of the Special Ops team couldn't stand by any longer. Their camaraderie drove them to instantly unleash their strongest attacks. One was a fire type awakened, waving his hand to conjure a roaring sea of flames. The other had scales growing all over his body, sharp bone spikes jutting out from his elbows. He was an extremely rare awakened who could strengthen his bones and even control an exoskeleton growing on the surface of his body, so tough that even bullets struggled to pierce it. But just as the bone-type awakened charged forward, Shuai waved her hand. A hurricane with speeds nearing 400 kilometers per hour blasted forward like a shockwave, blowing the sea of flames right back. It slammed straight into the bone-type awakened, completely exceeding the fire-type awakened's expectations. The bone-type awakened screamed in agony. He could withstand cold weapons, but he couldn't endure the terrifying heat of the flames. His hair scorched, his flesh burned raw. Luckily, his exoskeleton helped mitigate the heat, or else he would have been roasted alive on the spot. Ian, the fire-type awakened's eyes went bloodshot seeing his teammate injured by his own flames. He never expected that curvy Asian girl to completely counter his ability. But besides fire, he had another trick, a heat beam. Just as he was about to condense his energy, he suddenly felt a bone-chilling cold wash over him. A sharp prick like a needle stung the back of his neck, and his entire body instantly stiffened. He slowly turned his head, only to see a petite girl who had appeared behind him out of nowhere. In her hand was a dagger, its tip pointed straight at the back of his head. With just a light thrust, the blade would pierce his spinal cord, taking his life in an instant. This girl looked like she had stepped right out of a Japanese manga. No one expected her speed to be so fast, it was practically teleportation. And every strike aimed straight for a vital spot, even more vicious than a stab to the throat. If you move, my knife goes in. Zero didn't know English, but the fire-type awakened understood her meaning perfectly. Being cornered by an assassin was like a mage having a knife held to the back of their neck. He had no choice but to surrender. In less than 10 seconds, the entire Special Ops team had been utterly defeated. Jonathan's face was now ugly to the extreme. He knew my group wasn't ordinary, but he never expected them to be this strong. Jonathan knew the strength of everyone under his command perfectly well. Yet, in front of this group of young women, they were completely crushed. Not just Jonathan. Everyone present, whether American soldiers or Japanese, was stunned into silence. The strongest team in the military zone. How could the gap be this massive? Those girls were clearly just women, yet every single one of them was unimaginably strong. It felt like an absurd dream. The Japanese waiter who had refused to give me the whiskey earlier was now pale as a sheet. He had no abilities. If he were killed, it would be no different from crushing an ant. Even though he wasn't the one who said 2 bottles of whiskey for a woman, he was still terrified of being implicated. These women, let alone 2 bottles of whiskey, even the lives of an entire elite squad might not be enough to trade for them. At this moment, all eyes shifted back to me. I sat among those girls like a star in a sky full of constellations. Earlier, people had thought I must be incredibly strong to be able to stand beside them. But now, seeing that these girls weren't just eye candy, but strong enough to drive people to despair, just who exactly was the man who could make them willingly stand by his side? In that instant, my image in everyone's eyes became shrouded in mystery. As for me, I still held my teacup, sitting quietly in the corner, as if everything that had just happened was already within my calculations.